I have only few days to live and I want my husband to fall in love with my sister. I met my husband when we were kids. We used to live in the same street and our parents were very close. Me, my sister, him and his sister never spent a minute without each other from when I was 4 until I was 11. We were still close after, but my now husband and his family moved a few blocks away. We were entering puberty, so he babysat me and his sis. But my sister is the same age as him, so they still hang out. Everyone at that time believed they were going to get married, but they never even got together. My sister did confess to having a crush on him when they were 12, but that's about it. Fast forward a few years, me and him reconnected after he moved away. At this point I was 20 and he was 24, just finished his studies abroad. We fell in love and hit it off. We married, had our son in January 2020 and a baby girl in August of 2022. After my daughter's birth I was diagnosed with cancer. It's terminal and I only have a few months left. Me and my husband are both very outgoing, social and kind of childish maybe, but lately all I can do is cry and lay in my bed. I am exhausted and the only reason I don't apply for euthanasia is because of my children. I know he will have no trouble finding a beautiful, caring partner in the future, but I still am scared. I know my sister has always liked him, and he likes her. Their feelings just never bloomed because of our relationship, but I can feel they're there sometimes. And recently they had a lot of one-on-one planning stuff because I am too tired. My kids find great support in her, and my husband too. I love them both, and I think that if he had connected with her first after moving back, they would have been together now. I am in no way jealous or delusional. I know the feelings will come and the sooner the better. I talked to my parents today. I told them how I think they will make a great couple and how I trust my parents to take care of all of them. Not to exclude my husband when I pass. They reassured me he will always be welcome and have thought the same in the past. My sister has even expressed feelings for my husband not too long ago, telling them she won't make a move but it needed to be said. The result of our talk was a lot of crying and me promising them to give them letters to hand out after my passing. I saw my sister shortly. She didn't understand why I cried, but we hugged for 15 minutes straight and I told her I want my husband to be happy with whoever is good for him after my passing. Then we cried together and she brought me home. Update. So, these past weeks were exhausting and exciting at the same time. Starting off with some bad news today. My health has hit a low, which hurts and is scary, but I knew it was coming. I don't know how long I have left, but it won't be too long. Like I said, I'm at peace with that knowledge. I know I will die and it will be fine. As for my parents, when I spoke with them they confirmed my exact thoughts. My sister and husband's love just hadn't had the chance to bloom yet. They found your idea of the letters incredibly beautiful but told me to also talk to my husband's parents. So I did. I made the long drive and told my husband I was paying my niece a visit. His parents broke down crying, telling me they admired me for my selflessness. We talked a lot about how it used to be when we were younger, and came to the conclusion they will always support my husband's choices and would love to get to know my sister better. I sat my sister down too, telling her I'd like her to help my husband grieve and help him move on after, no matter with who. She hugged me, told me of course, and we discussed some things about the kids. I joked about them getting together to play mom and dad. She smiled. I think she's seeing right through me, like she always has. And last but not least, my husband. I haven't told him anything. I did cook them both dinner and made them enjoy it on their own while I was busy with the kids. It wasn't awkward. It was best friendish but sweet. I wrote the letters. My parents and husband's siblings know where they are and will hold on to them. One for my kid, one for my husband right after I passed, and one for my sis and hubby a few months after my passing.
Is reviewing your relationship a bad thing? The first year of our married life was hard. Even though I wanted to be with John, things weren't working out. I was mad at him for not pulling his weight around the house, and he was unhappy that I didn't like his daily TV watching habit. It is amazing how seemingly simple things like these can pull you apart. We were headed for either a bad marriage or a divorce. At the end of the year, I had a review at work. This was my first real job after college. I was asked what my accomplishments were for the year, where I saw myself going, what I wanted to do, what I liked and didn't like about my work. That got me thinking. If I put in this effort to evaluate my work that I have not much allegiance to, why not do the same with my relationship? If these questions can help me have a better work life, then why not see if they can help me have a better relationship at home? I came home and suggested we do the same for our marriage. John wasn't excited, but he played along. It was awkward and too clinical in the beginning, to say the least. Here are the questions we both. What has been my contributions to the marriage in the past year? What is something that I bring to the marriage that doesn't help the marriage? What has been my partner's contributions to the marriage in the past year? What is something that my partner brings to the marriage that doesn't help the marriage? What is the one thing that I should work to be better at in the coming year? What is the one thing that my partner should work to be better at in the coming year? We write these answers in a notebook, taking turns. The only condition is that the number of points in number 1 should be greater than the number of items in number 2, and number of points in number 3 should be greater than the number of items in number 4. This is so that we come away feeling appreciated, not judged. We then read out loud and explain to our partner what we mean by what we wrote. At the end, we decide what each of us should work on in the coming year. We just celebrated 24 years of marriage. Now we make the review day a romantic one, so we look forward to it. Since we have written our reviews in the same notebook, we have the fun of reading how we have evolved together over the years. Nowadays, we literally have to find things to complain about in each other because we have resolved most of the pesky issues and we are genuinely happily married.
What side hustle could easily replace your career? I made thousands of dollars per month just by giving catnip to anxious dogs. After my ex-boyfriend cheated on me for my stepbrother, my life was plunged into hell. I wasn't mad at him for being gay, but it put me in a rough spot in my life. I was now forced to live alone and relocate since there was no housing around my last job. I had to start working at a grocery store for minimum wage. But ever since a cha-cha matcha was built down my block, I had to work 2 shifts every day just to make ends meet. I felt like I was wasting my life away, especially when I knew what my true passion in life was. I always wanted to work with animals. I didn't know in what field or how, but it was like all my anxiety and worries went away when I was with the puppy. I've been looking for jobs where I can take care of dogs, whether that be at a clinic or just dog sitting, but nobody was ever hiring. I didn't give up though, because I knew that after all this suffering something good must come my way. And just months later, it did. After a long graveyard shift, I found an urgent help wanted posting on Indeed by a dog grooming clinic. After waiting for a couple days since applying, I was called for a quick phone interview, and started that same weekend. When I arrived to the dog groomers, it was just me and another girl. She told me that the boss is almost never there and it was just her running the place. I told her I didn't have any experience in grooming dogs, but I was willing to help out in any way I could. My job became deep cleaning the place up and down, making sure there wasn't any mold that'd get the dogs sick. The best part of the job? A lot of the time I was called to help hold down and calm dogs that were anxious, which I didn't realize was such a common problem. You would be surprised by the number of dogs that came who had anxiety and found situations like getting trimmed and bathed very stressful. Their long nails would leave my coworker and I with scratches all over my arms. You'd think we were doing Hannah Baker cosplays. Very rarely would they bite us, but that's because we'd have to put muzzles on, which always pained me to do. I could tell that they were just anxious and didn't know how to trust us. Putting muzzles on them always felt morally wrong, but I didn't know what else to do. One day, a posh-looking woman came in with her jittery chihuahua. Listen, I love dogs, but I can't get past chihuahuas. Just looking at those cracked-out dogs makes me feel anxious. When I was holding her down to clip her nails, my coworker must have clipped too deep because the chihuahua lunged at her and bit her honker. My coworker screamed and nearly punched the dog. Thankfully, I held her back. She threw her apron in the trash, took out about $150 from the cash register and stormed out. To this day, I have never seen her since. I wonder if her pepperoni is okay. I called the chihuahua's owner to come get her dog because we couldn't take care of her. I explained the situation to the owner and all she did was coddle her dog. Then she slipped something in the wet rat's mouth. She told me that she usually gives her dog a Paw Ranger calming chews before the appointment so she stays calm, but she had forgotten to, and that's why her lint ball she called the dog started going crazy. I asked her what the Ranger chew was and she asked if I had a Ziploc bag. She gave me a handful and told me that this was like giving catnip to dogs. It soothes them and eases their anxiety. It stops them from being freaky tweakers and should help me do my job without any of my usual problems. I took back her chihuahua after she gave the pet chew to it and started grooming her. The chihuahua was so relaxed it even put out its paw to me while I was clipping its nails like I was its acrylic nail technician. Giving her a bath came super easy and it was actually enjoying the edible soap. By the end of the session, for the first time in my life, I actually liked the damn chihuahua. The chihuahua's owner was super grateful and apologized to me deeply for the pepperoni incident and left me a big tip. To be honest, she didn't have to leave me one because today she taught me how to make thousands. I bought Paw Ranger chews immediately that day and made it part of my every grooming routine. I always asked the owners if it was okay if I gave their dog Paw Ranger chews and most of them quickly agreed and some even thanked me for putting them on. Never again did I have to put a muzzle on any puppy just because they were anxious. The Ranger chews let them know that I was there to take care of them and they were going to leave with the freshest and best smelling butt for the dog park. I was getting so many reviews racked up for the store and business was going incredible. But the owner who was never there kept making more money while I was still making $11 an hour. So I stole all her clientele and started my own practice. I kept up my veterinarian studies and hired those who were just like me, who had no prior experience, and I taught them how to learn. We were able to invest in more expensive products to soothe dogs like special puppy massagers and special bubble baths. We grew into more than just a grooming service. We became the doggy spa. For those that either find our service unnecessary, which is a simple way of saying they hate their dogs, I'd recommend sticking to using Paw Ranger chews, as it's an affordable and effective way to help dogs that suffer from anxiety and stress or have the occasional pepperoni craving. My mother-in-law pretends not to hear me despite my constant warnings not to feed my baby a cake, so I left without explanation and made her cry. I have a 7-month-old daughter with my husband 34M. My country does ensure a long maternity leave for up to 2 years. However, I am self-employed and cannot afford to lose my clients, so I try to work while my daughter is sleeping and during the weekends. Lately, she's been teething, so I'm operating on little to no sleep. I have an issue with my mother-in-law. She does what she wants despite people asking her not to and then says oops or denies doing it. Things like that. It was annoying before the baby, but after she was born it became insufferable. My husband talked to her and set boundaries, so she stopped doing that when my husband was present, but she was still doing it when it's only me in the room. So we agreed she cannot visit when her husband is not at home and her husband is not to leave me alone with her. Because of these boundaries, we did not see them for 1.5 months. They lived 2 hours away and we did not find a mutually good time. They finally came over last Sunday. 20 minutes into the visit, my father-in-law wants to see a lawnmower that has broken down, so my husband goes into the backyard with him, leaving me, the baby, and mother-in-law inside. She's drinking coffee and eating cake. She sits next to my daughter on her playmat and tries to feed her some of her cake. I immediately told her, no, she couldn't have that. Mother-in-law pretends not to hear me and proceeds to put her spoon in my daughter's closed mouth. I repeat, stop doing that, she can't have a cake yet, and definitely not from your spoon. Still, she pretends not to hear me. I repeat it again, still nothing, and now there's cake on my baby's face and she's fussing. So I grab my daughter and go to my husband and father-in-law, subtly gesturing him to return inside. After about 5 minutes, mother-in-law decided to go outside too and approached me and the baby. I gestured to my husband again, and he made an annoyed face. I had no energy to deal with any of this, so I stood up, went inside, grabbed baby bag and car keys, and went to the car without saying a word. Mother-in-law asked me where I was going and I ignored her. I drove to my sister's, which is about a 15-minute drive. There were some missed calls from my husband, so I texted him where we were and told him that we'd be back in the evening. It was time for my daughter to nap, and she fell asleep breastfeeding, so my sister told me to go to sleep, too. After she woke up and had her milk, my sister took her and told me to go back to sleep. I slept 3 hours in total, and my phone was on silent, so my husband's calls were ignored apparently. His parents left disappointed, and mother-in-law cried. My husband is furious I did this. We're still fighting about it. He couldn't believe I was so rude and took the baby away when his parents came to see her after such a long time. He's angry. I couldn't have waited a few minutes for him to finish talking about the lawnmower. I told him I'm too exhausted to deal with this poop. He left me alone with mother-in-law despite our agreement, so I left. Am I the a-hole?
My girlfriend threw the flowers I gave her in the trash. Yesterday we celebrated 2 years of dating. Even though I'm having some financial problems, I bought a bouquet of flowers for her and took her out to dinner. It wasn't much, but it was from the heart. I picked her up at her house, gave her the flowers, and she said they were beautiful. She said she liked them. This morning I woke up early and decided to take my dog for a walk before going to work. I wanted to take a different route and pass the front of my girlfriend's house. The trash can at her house was full, and right at the top of the trash I saw the red flowers. I went to the trash can to make sure they were the ones I had given her yesterday, and they were. They were crumpled and folded. She didn't even open the card inside. It wasn't even 5 in the morning, so it's obvious that she threw them away last night. I felt hurt, not by the cost of the flowers, but by her attitude in throwing them away like that. If I receive a gift from a loved one, even if I don't like it, I'm not going to throw it in the trash like that just a few hours after receiving it. I haven't said anything about it to her yet. I don't know whether to confront her about it or, from now on, watch out for any other sign of ingratitude. Either way, at some point or another she's going to have to explain it to me. I confessed my love to my neighbor and can't get over him. 1 year later, I've known my neighbor since we were kids. Growing up, we faced similar challenges and found solace in each other's company. We supported each other through tough times and shared many tears together. We even attended the same secondary school, which I was grateful for because it meant we could continue our friendship. My life took a difficult turn when my abusive father left me and my mom. 2 years later, my mom remarried a widower who treated me kindly. It felt like my life was improving, and he allowed me to attend a normal secondary school, unlike my biological father who pressured me. During this time, I realized that my neighbor, who was popular in school and had many girlfriends, always treated me with respect. Despite rumors about us being cousins, I never corrected anyone because his presence in my life meant a lot to me. As time went on, I found myself falling deeper in love with him. Thoughts of him consumed my mind, and sometimes it made it difficult to sleep. When he pursued his studies in junior college, we grew apart a bit, but I discovered that his parents were going through a separation. He even confessed that he had contemplated ending his life. This revelation shocked me because I never saw him as someone who would have those thoughts. I confided in his sister and, unbeknownst to me, it was not something he wanted to share openly. He became angry with me for breaking his trust, and I felt guilty. However, when we both ended up in the same junior college, our friendship rekindled. We spent more time together, and I cherished every moment. There were instances when he leaned his head on my shoulder during train rides, and my heart felt like it could burst with joy. But he continued to have sporadic girlfriends, leaving me confused and hurt. Eventually, I mustered the courage to confront him about our relationship, and he responded with ambiguous statements. His affectionate gestures and sweet acts made me believe there was something more between us, but he insisted that we were like siblings and that he loved me. I admitted that I loved him, but it hurt that he only saw me as a little sister. I expressed my pain and asked him to let me go. It was a difficult moment, and I cried as he held me in his arms for a short while before agreeing to release me from my feelings. Since then, we've rarely spoken. He graduated shortly after, and now he's serving in the national service. Our interactions are polite but distant, and I still cry at times, longing for him. As my birthday approaches, I can't help but think about the absence of the once cherished sundae he used to gift me. I feel miserable and lost every night, missing him intensely. I've been in a relationship for the past 6 months, but even with my current partner, my thoughts remain fixated on my neighbor. Intimacy with my boyfriend feels empty because my heart continually yearns for him. I feel trapped in this longing, and I don't know what to do. I apologize for the lengthy post. I'm just overwhelmed with sadness. An elderly woman touched our son, so my wife went feral. I heard my wife scream help, while me and her were shopping. I ran over from the aisle I was in, and she was freaking out because an elderly woman hugged our 19-month-old son. However, you could tell the woman was harmless. The woman's son came along and profusely stated that she had dementia and she meant no harm, that she tends to view every child as her child. I said it was okay, and I myself apologized for my wife's overreaction. During this time I was not paying attention and my wife called 911 and called over security. It became a huge mess for all parties because my wife was not letting the issue go. You could also tell the son was extremely embarrassed, as was I. I was trying to relax my wife, but she was going on a complete meltdown rage, saying that his mother should be in a home if she cannot keep her hands to herself. What if she got our kid sick, tried to kidnap him, got combative and hurt him? All of which I agree are possible outcomes, but I told her none of that happened, so let's just leave it. Security states since the wife called the police we had to wait for them to show up, so they can file a report as per their store policy. About 25 minutes later police showed up and asked what happened and my wife explained everything. You can tell the police were like, "What the F is wrong with this woman?" I felt nothing but disappointment. Police took the statement and started laughing as they left. I gave the son of the elderly mom a fist bump and said sorry. My wife was upset I did not have her side, she was upset how I took the side of the son instead of her. I explained his mom was clearly sick, it was a harmless gesture, and explained she was one that acted unreasonably. I did acknowledge her concerns, but nothing bad happened. We could have just let it slide and went on with our day. She told me I failed as a husband. Revenge is a dish best served cold. Mine has been cooling for 10 years and counting. I have been married to my husband for 20 years now. We have 2 kids and my husband is what I would consider a high earner by middle class standards. 10 years ago, and by complete coincidence, I found out that my husband has been cheating on me, with men, since before we got married. We live in a smallish town in the south of the USA. Him coming out as gay will have consequences within the community. I believe that that is the only reason he has not come out to anyone. First, here's how I found out he was cheating on me. He got sloppy and left a credit card bill for a secret card in the pocket of a coat. While going through it I found all the telltale signs of infidelity: payments to a hotel in a nearby county, restaurant bills, gifts, flowers, protection, and lubricant. I started camping outside the hotel on days he told me he would be late, and I saw him bringing different men there. I am very good at compartmentalization and have a great poker face. It comes with growing up in an abusive household. So I was able to give myself the time to cool off and to come up with what I should do. First thing I did was get an STD panel since I didn't know how safe he was with his partners. It came out negative. Then I convinced him that we should use protection since I was having side effects from the pill. He was okay with it. I had a long think, and I came up to the decision that I was not going to confront him, nor was I going to leave him. He was able to provide me a really good lifestyle, one that I would never be able to afford with my high school diploma, a cleaning lady, a nanny to help with the kids, regular spa days and a country club, a new car every other year, luxury family vacations every year. He was a good dad, a good partner, the cheating aside, and really good in bed. But I was not going to let him have a single guilt-free week in his life. That would be my revenge. I started small. planning great date nights for us, telling him that I felt our relationship has cooled, that I wanted the spark back. Then I would sometimes slip into conversation some tea about a cheating husband, a gasped gay man that has been using his poor wife as a beard, complimenting the only gay couple we know for having the courage of being real men, who were out and proud of themselves. On the other hand, I would praise him as the perfect husband to anyone and everyone, especially if he was in earshot. The amount of guilt gifts I got was astounding. The man was even sending me flowers weekly. It continued the same way for years. I could literally see how much it was weighing on him. Me? Well, my parents were part of a commune with the concept of free love. I was the same. I just considered myself in an open marriage. It seems that cheating is easier to ignore if you are not that big on monogamy in the first place. And my husband was keeping me satisfied, so I felt no need to find a partner of my own. Then 4 years ago, I guess he met the love of his life. He started seeing just the one guy. I was seriously thinking of ending the whole thing, especially since I have started a business by then, and was able to bring in enough money to support myself and my kids, while maintaining my lifestyle. But then he went and introduced his side piece to us. He effing brought him into our house, introduced him to our kids, and that was enough for me to keep tormenting him. Apparently he was a new friend he made while golfing. He started hinting at moving to another state, one where it would be easier for him to come out. I refused. I told him that my business was here, and I was not going to start over in another state. Also, the kids had their friends and extended family here. It would be unfair to uproot them. Then he started trying to start arguments. I guess he wanted us to fight, then for me to ask for a divorce. I just stopped all those arguments in their tracks. I would just agree with whatever he said. He was right, I was wrong. And to make it up to him, how about a nice dinner and some great intimacy? He hated that. I knew from spying on his phone that having intimacy with me felt like cheating on his BF, the audacity of this man. I also knew that his BF was pressuring him to leave me almost every day. He was stuck between a rock and a hard place. He started drinking, and when it got too heavy, that was when I decided that enough was enough. I wanted to ruin his life, not his health. Also, I grew up with an alcoholic father, and did not want that for my kids. So I gathered all the evidence of his infidelity over the last 9 years, photos with different men, conversations, his Grindr profile, even though he no longer had one, everything. Then I hired a divorce attorney, and mailed the evidence to his employer. He has a morality clause in his contract, and adultery breaks it. All his relatives, including parents, as well as our church, I was never big on religion like him. It was like a bomb exploded. He was fired, the congregation turned on him, for cheating, not for being gay, let's keep that straight. I would never allow me kids to be part of a church that discriminated against their father, even if he was not out. His parents wouldn't take him in after I kicked him out, and he was shamed publicly. Gotta love that small town gossip mill. And the cherry on the top? His BF was run out of the town, and he couldn't follow him because he wanted to fight for custody of our kids. Now almost a year later, I am a free woman. I got to keep the house, my car and my business. He got 75% of the retirement and investments accounts, but he won't be paying alimony. I got full custody, he got visitations. I also got child support. He had to move 6 hours away to find a new job, couldn't put the last job he worked at his whole life as a reference. His relationship with his family is rocky, his reputation in town is ruined, so he can't move back anytime soon. The love of his life left him for good, and my kids only tolerate him because I did my best to shield them, and to tell them that he is still a good father to them. I also made sure to treat him politely, never talked bad about him, and had a lengthy talk about how their father being gay is okay, it's who he is and that it was not his fault. That the only wrong thing he did was hiding it from me. So I guess the results of his cheating was years of guilt followed by a ruined life. What is the worst wedding you've ever been to? While in high school, a recently graduated friend got pregnant and had to get married. Both sets of parents were incensed that their good religious children had sex before marriage, and both sets of parents were convinced that the other parent's child was to blame. His parents thought the bride was no better than a street-walking whore. Her parents thought the groom was opportunistic child toucher. She was 18, he was 20. Then there were the cultural slurs thrown around, mostly by his family since they were white and the bride's family was Hispanic. When the father of the groom asked if the bride's family planned on serving dirty rice, hey at the reception, I thought the grandmother of the bride was going to body slam the idiot out the door. So we get to the day of the wedding and the bride's 6 brothers spend the day skulking around like they've got weapons hidden in their suits. The groom's family continued to try to convince him that he should at least wait until the bastard is born so you can find out if it's yours or not, right up until he went to stand at the altar. After a very quick ceremony, the whole crowd heads off to the reception being held in the rec room of an apartment complex. The bride and groom tried to make the best of it. There was no dancing or even music because of their religion, and the food was just snack type stuff. It was a whole room of unhappy family members sucking down red punch and bad attitudes. Then comes the coup de asshole. The groom's sister, who was a good 15 years older than the groom, had volunteered to provide the wedding cake as she'd been making really fancy cakes for family birthdays for years. Bride was kind of excited about this since it was really the only gesture of welcome she got from the groom's family. Sister took off right after the ceremony to go and pick up the cake, and after an hour, had still not shown up. After another 30 minutes, the bride was ready to just break a chocolate cookie with the groom and be done with it when sister arrived, carrying 3 store-bought coconut cakes. Correction, 3 of the smallest stores-bought cakes ever in existence, and they were obviously not fresh cakes. They had discount stickers on the boxes. Each cake said it served 6 people and there were over 70 people at the reception, plus they were coconut, which the bride was allergic to. The groom's sister had obviously spent an hour or so driving around to different stores looking for the worst of all cakes for this wedding, and she never even tried to explain why she did not make the cake herself as she had offered to do. I don't think the bride stopped crying for days, and the groom just looked like he wanted to shoot his whole family. What's a life-saving tip everyone should know? Pressure on the wound is more important than covering it. Ice can also stem blood flow. If you think you're being followed, turn right 4 times. Since you'll get to the same place, they shouldn't be following you anymore. If they do, you might be in trouble. Since it's a common warning that you shouldn't go home when you think someone is following you, the smartest is to go to a police station. Learn how to stay calm, breathe and assess situations. This will help in so many future surprise situations. Be aware of your surroundings, exits, bathrooms, and where medical fire kits, where landline phones are if they are around. If you've swallowed something wrong in a restaurant and it's blocked your throat, even if you aren't technically choking yet, do not go to the bathroom out of embarrassment. The majority of female choking deaths occur in the restroom because they excuse themselves out of embarrassment for making a scene. If you are alone and start choking, you can use the back of a chair or sofa to perform the Heimlich maneuver on yourself. If a service dog comes up to you, follow them. Service dogs will only leave their owners as a last-ditch effort for help. Tomorrow, I'm going to completely destroy his life. We've been together for 3 long years, and we had plans to get married once things settled down. I had dreams of starting a family with him. I loved him more than anyone else in the entire world. I made countless sacrifices for him, leaving my home behind, rejecting job opportunities so I could be by his side, and supporting him as he went back to school. I gave him my everything. And what does he do? He cheats on me. I discovered it a little over a month ago. The despicable scumbag got careless, and I found out he was cheating on me with not just one, but 2 different women. One of them happens to be a teaching assistant at his university, while the other is his best friend's girlfriend. I'm beyond furious. As I write this, I'm struggling to contain my anger. I loved him so deeply, he was my entire world. But now, I'm determined to reduce his world to ashes. I've been financially supporting both of us ever since he quit his job last year to pursue his education. Despite that, I was more than willing to help him out since I earn enough to sustain us both. The only small consolation is that the student loans are in his name and have no connection to me. It will be painful to cut off this scumbag completely, but I will survive. For a whole month, I've bided my time, meticulously planning what I call the day his world burns. Tomorrow, we're hosting a party. I've arranged for his family to attend, although regrettably, my own family won't be able to make it. I've already packed all the valuable belongings into a suitcase, which now rests in the trunk of my car. Tomorrow, during the event, my brother will discreetly take the car, registered under my name, and drive it to our parents' house. The joint account, which actually contains only my money, has already been emptied. The event itself will seem wonderful to him. He'll believe it's to announce our engagement to his family. Little does he know that I'll be making a different announcement, one about my departure from his life. I've already secured a job out of state and found a new place to live. I'll start by revealing his true nature to everyone present. I'll share the screenshots of his explicit conversations, where he solicited his friend's girlfriend to engage in degrading acts, among other depraved fantasies he concocted. I'll hand him the eviction notice as well, since I've already terminated our lease. We need to vacate the premises by the end of this month. I'll inform him that I've already reported his affair with the teaching assistant from one of his previous semesters to the university, although I'm disappointed that I won't get to witness the repercussions firsthand. Additionally, his friend has a message for him, one that I'll deliver, stating that the entire friend group wants nothing to do with him ever again. And with that, I will leave. I will not look back. I will set his life on fire and walk away, never to return. When did you guys first ever see a titty? I was 16, and still very much an awkward teenager, just sitting at home one night when my phone rang. A group of girls were going to a party at my good friend's house and wanted me to tag along since they knew he and I were close. So we get there and it's a normal party situation. Someone got a case of beer, another stole some liquor from their parents' cabinet. So after an hour or 2, everyone was teenager buzzed and getting flirty. We sit down for a game of truth or dare, and the typical kiss her and take your shirt off goes around a few times. So after about an hour, there's a bunch of us half naked in a circle. This is around the time where it goes downhill. My buddy's dad comes home early from whatever he was doing and we hear the garage door open. We all panic and try to redress as quickly as possible. In the calamity, I grabbed a girl's shirt and she starts freaking out because she couldn't find it. His dad walks in as I'm struggling to put on what I finally figured out wasn't my shirt, and starts yelling at us all to get out. I gave the girl back her shirt as everyone is rushed out of the house. I'm the last to leave as I want to find my clothes, but give up after his dad is getting seriously pissed off at me. By the time I get to the driveway, I notice the girls have left without me. So I'm stuck a few miles away from home without a ride and a shirt. I said fuck it, there's no remedying this situation, and just ran my drunk ass as far as I could. I made it about halfway before I stopped to catch my breath in a neighborhood next to a greenbelt. I'm paused on the sidewalk when I look up and see a cop parked a few houses down. Cop flicks on his headlights and I just stopped. There was no way I was going to make this situation any worse. So they pull up next to me and ask if everything is okay. I was completely honest with them and told the entire story. I fully expected a ticket, but they just started laughing at me and offered a ride home. When I got home, I see my mom sitting on the porch smoking a cigarette. So I step out of a cop car, half naked in the middle of the night, to my mother shaking her head looking like hellfire has struck deep in her soul. I got grounded for 2 weeks.
My entitled husband's girl best friend photoshopped intimate photos of my husband cheating on me to steal him away from me. I nearly lost the love of my life because I couldn't stop thinking about his girl best friend during intimacy. My husband and I have always had amazing chemistry in bed. He could say anything in a suggestive tone, and I'd immediately pull out a wand and a rabbit. I would say our relationship was picture perfect, but his best friend Emily has caused a huge rift in our relationship. Wherever he went, she'd trail shortly behind. At first, I tried to get along with her, but she made me regret it every single time. She had made it a point that she thought she was better than me somehow. Once, I was fixing my hair in front of her and my husband and complaining about how frizzy my hair was. She saw the perfect opportunity and started ranting about how she was born with pin straight hair and only needed to brush it once a day to achieve her perfect shine. It got even more annoying when I saw that she'd start copying my outfits, but making them more expensive by adding a Coach bag. My husband never noticed it, even complimenting her when she added something cool to an outfit like a jersey. Whenever he complimented her, she'd look at me and wink, as if it proved that she was a better match for him after all. One time she even tried to seduce him by wearing a tight t-shirt and no bra and trying to do some weird yoga pose that had all of her butt in his face while working out. I had enough when she DM'd my husband asking him to meet in a janitor's closet for a surprise, which he immediately showed me because he thought it was weird. I knew he didn't entertain her, but she was starting to get under my skin. I guess he noticed my discomfort, because he stopped hanging out with her altogether. Whenever we saw her in the street, he would look the other way and act like she didn't even exist. When I asked him why, he said it was because he was tired of her behavior. She knew how much he loved me, but she couldn't handle him having time for anyone else but her. We were doing well together until I got a "hey girly" text in the middle of the night. Emily sent me 4 screenshots where my husband and her were texting and talking about meeting up to let him put it in during one of his business trips. I was heartbroken and demanded my husband explain to me why he would betray me like that. He looked at me like I was crazy, which pissed me off even more until he gave me his phone like it was nothing. I checked his messages and his messages showed an entirely different situation. He hadn't even texted her since he asked for his limited edition Kendrick Lamar vinyl back 6 years ago. She sounded like a complete idiot, so my husband and I just blocked her and moved on. But for some reason, I couldn't get over what I saw in those texts. I tried to cope by reporting her and sending her number to Intimate Disease Mandatory Reporters so that she'd be paranoid about catching a disease. It wasn't enough though. Although I knew he would never betray me like that, especially since he proved himself so well here, I also knew that I wasn't the most attractive person in the world. Emily was prettier and was his childhood best friend, and I knew deep down that she would be a better match for him. I bottled it up so much that it started affecting my husband and I's relationship. I started avoiding him and not talking to him as often, because I couldn't look him in the eye and imagine Emily looking into those same eyes. It started affecting our intimate life the worst. Before, we could give each other one look and we'd instantly want to jump each other's bones. It was like we couldn't get enough of each other. We'd have intimacy at least once a day, sometimes even more. He knew all of my sweet spots and every time, I'd find myself begging for more. But now, I couldn't even get turned on enough when we tried to get into it because I kept imagining him doing the same things in the texts Emily sent. If we did follow through with intimacy, I could tell he was uncomfortable because I looked absolutely miserable. I kept picturing him putting it in Emily and actually enjoying it. I rarely initiated intimacy either, and I could tell it was starting to get to him. One night, I tried to start intimacy with him by wearing my hottest clothes and giving him my signature look. When he caught on to what was going on, he started kissing me softly. Every single one of his touches made my skin tingle, and I started to trail my hands down his body. But as I started to touch his boxers, the image of Emily biting off his boxers with her teeth as she said in the text popped up. I literally jumped 50 feet away from him. He looked so hurt, but I told him I wasn't feeling it today. I went to dinner the next day with my best friend and started talking about my anxiety. She told me she went through something similar when she gained a couple of pounds last year. She said she didn't feel right in her own skin, so when she tried to be intimate with her partner, she didn't even want the lights to be on. She spent the whole experience paranoid that he would feel her stomach rolls, and it got to the point where she would stiffen up during intimacy and not enjoy it at all. She told me she used something called a quickie kit, which had some products that she used with her boyfriend, and when they used it, they were doing it like rabbits. She was finally able to turn on the lights during intimacy because she was so wrapped up in the idea of being with him that everything else just melted away. I decided to look into it that night and ordered some. In about a week, it came in and I pulled my husband aside to talk. I told him that I loved and trusted him and that I wanted him to try this out with me to see if something would change. It had different types of oils that were supposed to turn me on and get my mind off Emily and focus just on me and him. He told me he was willing to do anything to make me feel comfortable and be present with him, so we tried it out. We started to go slowly, but when I kissed him I knew I missed his body so badly. He started to rub the arousal oils on me and I swear I felt sparks every time he touched me. The arousal oil calmed my legs, and started to make my fluids more intense. I saw him in a completely different light. Just the sight of him made me have to squeeze my legs. I felt a new type of frenzy, and I basically jumped on him. He kissed every inch of my body and then took out the intimacy melts. Once he stuck them inside of me, I couldn't resist. Every nerve in my body was activated, and I needed him and me desperately. So I grabbed the CBD lube from the quickie kit and rubbed it on him, then slipped it in myself. It had never slipped in that easy, and he could tell I was the most wet I had ever been for him. There was a ferocious energy in the both of us, and we started going at it. I never heard him moan as loud as he did when I slipped it in, and he didn't stop then. I heard him groaning the whole time about how good I felt around him, and I couldn't resist. This quickie kit was making me go crazy. Every single movement felt like I was floating until it got to the point where I couldn't handle it and finished. In my whole time of dating him, I'd never finished as hard as I did at that moment. We just lay there in shock for a few minutes after. The thought of Emily's little Wattpad fantasy didn't even pop into my head at any point during that. It didn't even feel like a possibility, because we felt like two puzzle pieces that fit perfectly together. I looked at him one more time and told him how much I loved him. He kissed me and all he said was, "Seconds." I grabbed the quickie kid and his pee so fast after that.
If there is anyone you've known in the past you've lost all contact with, who is it, and how or why? The closest best friend I ever had. We met when we were 12 and stopped talking at 26. I do not have much family, and from like 13 to 15 her family took me in and basically raised me as their own. We stayed insanely close through all of those years. We hung out all the time. I spent many family holidays with her. We were both each other's maid of honor at each other's weddings. I left work for the birth of her first son just to sit in the waiting room. She was in the room during the birth of my daughter, literally holding my leg as I pushed. We considered each other family and took it very seriously, even if we weren't blood related at all. We had a couple of small fights in middle school, but really nothing since then. So I really thought it was a lifetime friendship. I would have bet that this girl over anyone in my life would be there at the end. I would have bet $1 million on that. In 2016 I moved to TX from our home state CA, and she was the last person I said goodbye to. I lived there for a year and we talked on the phone all the time, texted constantly, and stayed very close. I even sent money to her to buy groceries multiple times since I was doing better financially at the time, and I loved her so much I just wanted to help. I even visited CA in December of that year and spent most of my time hanging out with her and her family. Then mid-January 2017 I got very sick and it affected my ability to walk. With all this going on I decided to move home. At the end of January, she and I were talking about how I was afraid I would lose friends over my new disability, and she literally said, "Well, you're crazy if you think you can get rid of me that easy." February 1st we had a convo about how I wanted to dye my hair. I had no idea this would be our last convo. Then I texted her on February 3rd, and when I hadn't received a text in 2 days I got a really bad feeling. So I called her and it went straight to voicemail. Then I called right back but blocked my number and it rang through completely. My heart effing sank. I kept trying to reach out but she blocked me on everything. I kept racking my brain trying to figure out what happened and why she suddenly hated me. I literally could not come up with a reasonable explanation. What in the world could be so bad that I deserved to be blocked with no warning and no explanation after 14 years of an extremely strong friendship? I never found out. I still do not have one clue 6 years later. We don't have any mutual friends, so I can't reach out to anyone to ask. I like to tell myself I'm over it, and in many ways I am. But my brain just craves closure on what happened. I texted her, to the blocked number, for years. Sort of like you would if someone died. I've had like 50 dreams where I run into her and demand an explanation and always get some illogical crazy response. Then I wake up and I'm angry again. I even had one this week. Why can't my brain move on? I'm also going through a bad breakup right now and I would love nothing more than to talk to her. She always had the best advice and could comfort me. I wouldn't even care about the past 6 years if we could just be friends again like we were before. It's still one of the worst heartbreaks I've ever experienced. I'm crying now even thinking about it. Identical twins, what's the greatest thing you've achieved by swapping places? My twin and I have pulled a lot of switches and pranks before, but this particular one stands out in my mind all too well. Sophomore year of college, my brother was taking a Psychology 101 class as a prerequisite. On one particular Tuesday, he approached me with a dilemma that he needed my help with. Thursday around noon he had an exam in psych, but that same morning his girlfriend's family was flying out to California to go to Disneyland and they picked him up a plane ticket. Of course I told him, "Okay bro, I'll go to Disneyland for you." But we all know that wouldn't be the case no matter how much I tried. He left me with all of the material I'd need and I started studying away in the hopes of acing this exam for him, or not heinously screwing up his grade. Here was the catch with the exam room: this professor was notorious for making it impossible to cheat. We'll call him Mr. J for this one. Mr. J had 7 TAs who would walk around during the exam and check the 2 forms of ID he required you to have and would constantly walk up and down the aisles to check for any form of cheating. My brother, having known this, left me with some of his IDs and wished me all the best. Exam time comes and I'm unaliving it. Just in case they'd notice any minute differences in looks or handwriting, I wore a backwards hat and wrapped up my hand as though it was injured. You can never be too sure. Now my twin and I love to play pranks on each other, it's just what we do. So I can't help but notice a cute blonde TA that is walking the aisles. The first time she passes me, I look up and give her a smile, almost like a cocky grin. The second lap through I look up again and whisper hi with an almost innocent smile. This continues throughout the exam until the last run through I whisper to her that I think she's cute. As luck would have it, she blushed and said I was too. When I went to turn in my exam, someone from on high was smiling down on me because she approached and gave me her number. Of course, she wasn't giving me her number, she was giving my brother her number. Knowing this, I told her I'd call her that weekend. Next week of class, she approached my brother and asked him why he never called. I wound up getting him a B and no one was the wiser. However, our story continues on 2 years later. I needed one more elective to graduate, and I figured I'd take the psych class that held the funny memory. The semester was going fine until one day I get an email from Mr. J, a very angry email, asking me to meet with him before class starts. As it turns out, the world could not be any smaller. Mr. J's mother, we'll say Mrs. M, lived in an apartment complex designed for the elderly. In this same complex resided my grandma who raised my brother and I. The two of them happened to become best friends. Mrs. M invited over her son, Mr. J, to have lunch with my grandma and herself. It was there that the topic of twins was brought up and my grandma told a wonderful tale of how her twin grandsons pulled this heist off in a psychology class, all the while not knowing how it was his psych class. Oh, he had some questions for me. I went down to meet with him, expecting certain expulsion for myself and or my brother. Luck was on our side though, because he just wanted to know exactly how we pulled it off. Every little detail he made note of. He spoke to the class, and it's to my knowledge that he tells the same story every semester now, and informed them that the only evident way to cheat in his class was to have an identical twin brother, but now they know to look for that. Also, hats are no longer allowed when taking the exam. I was not punished for it because he said I helped him out and all I did was get my brother a B, so it made him laugh. Parents of Reddit, how did you react when your child brought home their transgender partner for the first time? My son recently came home from college for the summer, and he brought his new girlfriend along. She was a sweet girl and I liked her right away. I thought it would be nice to have dinner with just the three of us before my husband got back next week, so I asked my son if his girlfriend wanted to join us on Friday night. He said she wasn't comfortable with that idea, so I asked why. That's when he told me that in high school she was known as Mikey and identified as a boy. I was effing shocked by this unexpected revelation. All I could do was stare at him blankly for a few seconds until we both started laughing our asses off. My poor daughter-in-law looked pretty uncomfortable during this whole exchange, but once we calmed down she explained that she had gone through hormone therapy in high school and had since transitioned fully into a woman, even showing me her ID card which stated her gender as female. She went on to say that her parents and brother knew about her journey, with her brother being the one who encouraged her to tell us, but felt it would be best if we found out after spending more time together first. The real kicker is my husband has no idea about any of this, so instead of worrying about how he'll take the news, now I'm just waiting until after dinner to break it to him so everyone can sit down together first. It's not what I originally planned, but at least now everyone will feel supported and accepted no matter what happens next. Parents of children with severe special needs, how do you manage to take care of yourselves? As a single mom with 2 kids, my life has been effing hard. My 14-year-old daughter is supportive, but my 6-year-old son's special needs have made things even more of a struggle. He has severe autism and regularly engages in self-harming behaviors that have resulted in multiple hospitalizations. There was even one terrifying incident where he tried to hurt himself while I was driving, which left me feeling completely overwhelmed. On top of his behavioral difficulties, my son's immune system is weak and he's had pneumonia multiple times this past year because he won't take care of himself or let anyone else help him out. It's been a constant battle since the day he was born and it has really limited my ability to do anything for myself like go on dates or just take some time for myself. My husband wants to close our marriage. I don't. I waited until I was 50 to get married because I wanted to be a grown adult person making grown adult decisions within my relationship. My husband is 11 years younger than me and he decided that the hormonal changes I was going through during perimenopause did not meet with his intimate satisfaction levels, and suggested that we go to a lifestyle party. When we get to the party, I have the attention of everyone in the room, male and female alike. My husband, however, has not received the attention from other females that he expected. Addition to his own insecurities about his body, he came to have insecurities about what other men were provided for me that he did not. His stance was that he didn't want his wife out having a good time and bringing the sparkle for other men that he doesn't get for himself at home. My response was that me spending time with my connection was to me the equivalent of self-care, and going to the salon to get my nails done. My husband rarely goes to the salon with me to get my nails done, but he benefits from me keeping myself beautiful. He resented that analogy. Going back a few months, after we decided to open the marriage to other connections, my husband began policing my communications, and what activity could take place on a date. And there was an understanding that our connections would be acquaintances in a sense. However, he broke the rules by going on a dating app, going out of town, having dinner with this woman, and then staying out till 1 a.m. to have intimacy with this woman without telling me beforehand. My solution was to show him how hurt I was considering how I allowed him to develop the path of my connections, but he didn't offer me the same courtesy. The reason I am unsatisfied with my husband now is because he has shown characteristic flaws that have burdened me, weighed me down and is keeping the prisoner inside this marriage. Prior to his exploration, I was perfectly content in my monogamous marriage. I told him about Pandora's box, and how you can never undo every evil that was released when you open the lid yet. His ego requires that I belong only to him. To be honest, I didn't think my husband even thought I was pretty until he saw that other men were attracted to me and both inside and out. He feels threatened, and now I'm in prison.
What celebrities have you encountered that were either really nice or really horrible? I ran into Adam Sandler outside of a Planet Fitness in Brooklyn in early 2016. As I was leaving the Planet Fitness, it looked like he was walking in. We made eye contact, so I stopped and held the door for him. He got to the door and stopped right before he walked through, in one of those fake poses that little kids make when you tell them to freeze. I stood there holding the door, plenty confused. For about 5 seconds, we just stood there, him, motionless, and I, standing there holding the door. Finally, he turned his head and said in the stereotypical Adam Sandler voice, "Ah, who we kidding? I'm not going in there." Giant grin on his face. We both laughed and then he continued down.
Am I the a-hole for laughing when my fiancé forgot I was infertile? I recently became engaged to my partner. We met on a dating app 3 years ago and hit it off from the start. 5 years ago I got my fallopian tubes removed. I've known I don't want to give birth since I was 15 years old and have never changed my mind about that fact. I always said that if a child came into my life I'd love it, but I'm not actively seeking that out. On my dating profile, it explicitly states child-free and infertile verbatim. At the beginning of our relationship, my now fiancé regularly referenced other things I put in my profile, so I had assumed he'd read that part, and kids never really came up in other convos. Well, last night he mentioned that I should consider stopping my birth control since now we're engaged, and given our ages, we should start trying for kids. I honestly thought he was joking and laughed. He got frustrated and asked me why I thought it was funny, and I reminded him that the second line of my dating profile said I was completely infertile. He was shocked and called me a liar. I happened to remember that I sent a screenshot of my dating profile to a friend for review around that time and pulled up the old convo with her to show him the time and date, and that indeed it stated I was child-free. I told him I had my tubes taken out, so there was no chance of me getting pregnant without outside help. IVF is technically still an option, but I don't want to put my body through that. He stormed out and his mom called me crying that I've ruined his life. His sister sent me a long message about how getting my tubes removed should be illegal and how I'm a monster for stringing my fiancé along. To be honest, his family never really like me because they think I'm beneath him. A cousin told me it's because I'm fat, which is true, but I'm also pretty active. I engage in regular walks with my dog, hiking, biking, swimming, paddleboarding, and a little snowshoeing, none of which my fiancé does with me. I'm also a career woman in a male-dominated field, plus we share the household labor 50-50 and I make more money than he does. Because of this, I don't take what they say too seriously, but I'm starting to feel bad. His family believes I stole years of his life and ruined future chances of being a father by lying about my fertility status. He asked for space when he stormed out, so I haven't reached out to him. I do love him, but I'm starting to have serious second thoughts given his family's reactions. My dentist touched me while I was under anesthesia, so I destroyed his business. I have been going to the same dentist since I was a child, so the fact that he assaulted me even though he had known me since I was young makes what he did all the more disgusting and shameful. I recently had to get a bunch of work done on my teeth, which required me to be put under mild anesthesia. I live on my own, and so there was nobody available to come with me to these appointments, so I already felt pretty vulnerable. My dentist was working without an assistant the first day I came in, and after he put me under, I started to realize something was off. I was extremely loopy, but I was still sentient enough to understand what was going on, just not awake enough to tell him to stop. I felt him touching between my legs and grabbing my chest, but again I was completely out of it, even though I understood what was happening to some level. When I came to from the anesthesia, I immediately understood what had happened to me, and it was so violating and chilling to have to come to terms with the fact that I had been touched while I was under anesthesia by a medical professional. I felt ashamed and alone afterward, but I still had future appointments where I would need to be put under anesthesia again. I was so nervous and I didn't want this to happen again. I know that I could have just gone to another dentist, but honestly, I didn't want him to get away with this. I thought about going to the cops, but he was a respected medical professional in our community and I was just some 19-year-old kid, and I knew there was a fat chance that the cops would believe me or do anything just based on my word. So I decided to take revenge into my own hands to make sure that he paid for what he had done to me. Before I returned to my next appointment, I bought a hidden camera from Amazon. Before my dentist came into the room, I hid it so that I could record everything that happened while I was under anesthesia. It was no surprise that he continued to touch me in the same exact way after I was under anesthesia during this appointment as well. I was so nauseated and uncomfortable, but I knew that I had to follow through with my plan. I reviewed the footage when I left the dentist's office, and it was honestly sickening to see this man taking advantage of me from a third-point perspective. But I was happy to have some proof against him. I went straight to the police station and gave them copies of the footage. Then I went home and printed out flyers with screenshots of the dentist with his hands down my pants while I was obviously passed out. Then I went back to his office building and I posted a bunch of the flyers right outside of his door as well as on the big corkboard in the building lobby. It's been a couple of months since all this went down, and a few other women ended up coming forward, which led to my dentist eventually getting arrested for assault. The other day, I drove by his office building and noticed that his sign was gone, and when you search his business on Google, it says permanently closed. It was such a violating experience to live through, but I know I did the right thing for my community even though I had to traumatize myself further to get justice.
Who is the most disturbing man that you personally know, and how did you get back at him? My uncles were gang affiliated and my eldest uncle was an amazing tattoo artist. My dad wasn't a gang member but was well known in our city for participating in gang activity but never jumped in. One of my uncles threw a party for his daughter's birthday. Practically anyone who wanted in the party was allowed to join in. Myself, my brothers and mother weren't at the party as it was also my mother's sister's birthday and we enjoyed being around her more. But my sisters went with my dad as they were close to my uncle's daughter. My sister was left alone sleeping in my cousin's room since our parties always ended up going until the next morning. The door to my cousin's room did not have a lock. As my 13-year-old sister was sleeping, she felt someone on her. As she woke up, she realized it was a boyfriend of one of our older cousins. He was 19 at the time. Nothing was known beyond that until a month later when my sister had finally told my mom. Brave of her, since she was only 13. Many people at that age keep quiet for years. Then everyone in my dad's part of the family became aware of this. Including my older cousin, the one with the creepy boyfriend. She was heartbroken but agreed on something with her dad. She set up her then boyfriend into meeting up with her at a local park. My dad along with my uncles and a few members waited at the park at around 9 p.m. It was a very lonely, barely lit, quiet park. A friend of my uncle known as Sonny had a small RV in which they waited in. The piece of crap arrived at the park. That's when my dad and the rest ran up to him and started laying blows on him until they dragged him into the RV. They arrived at my uncle's place, the one who did tattoos. Once they arrived they took him inside where my uncle was ready with all his equipment and gave him some new artwork all over his face, neck, head and hands. All over he had writing indicating that he had forced himself onto my sister. Including an extremely big tattoo across his forehead all the way to the right side of his head that said 13-year-olds. And then added a love heart after. They waited until he woke back up. Now around 2 a.m. they dumped him in front of his father's house. Not to be discovered by neighbors until the sun came out. My father left a heavy well-written note on the door of the piece of crap's dad house. This led to his dad kicking him out of his house. Surprisingly one of his friends let him stay with him for a while until a month after the incident. Two of his friends were found guilty on a charge regarding taking someone's life. Apparently it happened around 3 months before this whole incident. He was sent to prison where he had his life taken by fellow prisoners in a brutal way. They set his room on fire. What is the most terrifying thing you've experienced? I have a big family. One day we were all hanging out in the family farm, and decided to spend the night. We just had girls in one room, and boys in another, and everything was going fine. It was around 4 in the morning when I woke up to one of my cousins standing by the door. The hallway light was on, and shining on my face, so I could only see his outline, but I knew it was Josh. I asked him what he was doing, and if he needed something, but he didn't move, and my eyes were starting to adjust. I could see more details, but I couldn't see his face. I was really sleepy and confused. When the hallway lit up, Josh's shape, everything disappeared. It was just darkness, and an open door. I knew I was awake, because I was sitting down. I decided to get one of my roommate's cousins up, and go check on the boys. Josh had an allergy to something, he didn't want to bother anyone, so he took a Benadryl and went to bed. When I checked on him he wasn't breathing. We got my uncle up, he gave Josh some heavy-duty medication, and we took him to a hospital. Everyone was fine. Josh told me he knew I was insomniac, and while he was suffocating, unable to make a noise, he kept praying I couldn't sleep, and decided to check on him.
My ex is a menace to society who spread rumors about me to his girlfriend. Yesterday, I got a message from Jessica asking whether I knew my ex-boyfriend Richard. I said yes, and she said that she wanted to ask a couple of things about him and I complied because I was curious, and to be frank a bit nosy about it. Apparently she knows me because Richard used to talk a lot about me when they were seeing each other, and she was wondering whether I have ever felt that he has ever wronged me, emotionally or financially. She just wanted to hear my side of the story and compare notes. So, I dated Richard for 4 months from November 2020 to February 2021. I met Richard through a dating app, and initially he was nice and charming so we chatted more and ended up dating. However, he ended up not being so nice nor charming as the relationship went on. We would argue and fight a lot, and most of it was about my past trauma of being assaulted. He claims that it haunts him that I was doing it with another person, other than him. He also picked a lot of fights with me about how my bisexuality will make me cheat on him with a girl. And also he was very insecure about my achievements because I got into university at age 15, and was already working when we were dating. He was and is still unemployed and in uni, and I own an iPhone, he always wanted one. He also would force me to send naked pictures, and if I didn't want to he would say something like, "Person who assaulted me, has seen you naked, so why can't I?" All of these made me really stressed out and anxious. When I decided to seek professional help, he would say things like, "You don't need psychiatrists, you just need God, and should I switch my major to psychology just to make you feel better?" I got prescribed anxiety meds and his reaction was, "Oh, so you're a substance addict now?" I decided to break up with him after all this escalated for the worst. He would threaten me that he would commit suicide. He would self-harm and started screaming and breaking things in front of me, and basically blamed me for that. After I told Jessica about my experience with him, she said that my version is different from what Richard is saying. So apparently, Richard has been telling her, and a couple of other girls, that I was the one self-harming in front of him even though he tried his best to calm me down. He also mentioned my assault and said that he doesn't believe me because it was probably consensual. He said that I'm insane, a danger to society, and Jessica should never interact with me. Jessica then told me about her experience with him. Apparently, apart from talking bad about me, he would force Jessica to dress more like me. She has a very feminine style, and my style is more grunge. She complied to this to appease him, and at one point when she showed her a photo of her in my style, he said, "Oh wow, you look exactly like Op, nice." He would also force her to send naked pictures, and say the same things as he did to me if she doesn't comply. He also talked to her about the times I had intimacy with him, and he would demonstrate the positions we did, and also my expressions when we were doing it, to her. She also told me that apparently he owes her a huge amount of money from their dates, which he claims he would split the bill, and from when he would ask her to buy him stuff online. The total of the money he owes is $700. In my country this amount is 3x the minimum monthly salary, which is a lot for her who is still in uni and working to pay off her student fees. She has confronted him about this and he basically denies ever asking her to spend money on him, and he would only pay $100 from the total of money he owes because he's responsible. She has talked to some other girls who knew him, and have confirmed that he does this to everyone: the self-harm, the talking bad about me and other exes, and the forcing things. We have created a group chat to kind of cope and tell stories about him and just be transparent about our feelings towards this situation. But, I honestly don't know what to do now. I feel sad that there are more victims of this guy. I want justice for her, myself, and all the other girls, but I don't know if that would even be possible. Should I confront him?
Am I the a-hole for ruining the vibes of a party I threw? A few nights back, I organized a fun game night for a small bunch of pals. It was supposed to be just 5 of us, me included. But then, out of the blue, one of my friends messaged me saying she'd be bringing a coworker from her job. Let's call him Matt. No biggie, I said. We kicked off with this card game where you tackle questions about yourself. Depending on the level, easy, medium, hard, the questions ranged from simple stuff to deeper things. Everybody was having a blast, and I was pretty pleased with how things were flowing. And then, bam. I drew a card with this question: tell us about the toughest thing you've ever faced. Some background first. A few years ago, I lost my sister when I was still in high school. I got pulled out of classes and rushed to her college, where I had to watch her pass away in the ICU. Needless to say, that's been the hardest thing for me. 3 friends in the group knew about this, but the other 2 and Matt didn't. Not wanting to bring down the mood, I shared that the toughest thing for me was moving to a college in a different state where I didn't know anyone. We were ready to move on, but then Matt chimes in: gee, if that's the hardest thing you've been through, you've got it pretty easy. Everything went quiet. Now, if he'd said it in a joking way, I might have brushed it off. But he said it like he was talking down to me, and I have to admit, it bothered me. Instead of leaving it be, I replied, well, the hardest thing I've faced is watching my sister pass away in the ICU and seeing her being laid to rest when I was 17. I just didn't want to be a downer. If things were quiet before, now they were super silent. Matt muttered a sorry, but soon after, game night kind of fizzled out. Once my friends left, the one who brought Matt texted me, calling me out for making Matt look bad and saying I should have let it slide. I do feel bad about how I reacted and cut the night short, but I also think I had a right to speak up. Was I in the wrong?
Which celebrity would break the internet if they made an OnlyFans? Part 2, Henry Cavill, Steve Buscemi. Partially because people would check it out of just morbid curiosity, but scarily, he might be good at it. He's a versatile dude. Emma Watson, I'll finally get to see her Chamber of Secrets. Jeff Goldblum. You know the profile picture that would be on it, too. Danny.
My 25M best friend, 24F, won't talk to me because I'm dating her sister, 16F. What should I do? When I met my best friend's sister, I realized she was downright perfect for me. She was absolutely gorgeous and super intelligent and mature. I know it sounds weird to say that, but you have to believe me. This girl's intellect is through the roof, and the fact that a woman can be so smart sometimes baffles me. Especially a woman that age. I decided to ask her out a few months ago and she said yes. We are madly in love with each other. I've been dating the sister for a few months now on the low without telling anyone, but the drama only started recently when we decided to make it official and tell my best friend. She did not take it well, to say the least. She left the room without saying anything and straight up slapped me when I went to check on her. She then went on a huge rant about me, calling me disgusting and calling me all sorts of really derogatory names, something that I really do not understand. I mean, if she was dating my brother and they loved each other very much, I would be 100% in favor of it and would even support the relationship. Later on, my best friend sent me a bunch of nasty text messages and threatening to expose me if I don't stop my relationship, before blocking my number, and now we haven't talked in almost 2 weeks. This is really hurtful as we've been best friends since 5th grade and remained close into adulthood. I didn't think she would be so angry about this, and I don't really understand why she is. Her sister is upset about it too, but reassures me it is not my faulty, and my sister has not come to terms yet with the fact that we are in love. We obviously didn't break up and are just trying to figure out how to handle this.
My twin tried to marry my fiancé. I've always been the prettier twin. I don't mean that in a beachy way. It's just what I've always been told. Makes no sense to me, we're identical. I met my husband, but my sister Emma was also attracted to him. Thing is, my husband likes my personality more than her, so looks aren't even a main factor. There are times where I caught Emma flirting with him and even pretending to be me. So that there was a clear difference between me and Emma, I decided to dye my hair. We're natural brunettes, so switching to blonde was a big change, one that I expected Emma to not do. A week after I had dyed my hair, Emma called me, sobbing that her hairstylist messed up her hair and she looks hideous, and she doesn't know what to do. I drive to the salon and see how badly they messed up her highlights. It was all blotchy and the majority of her hair looked like that. I suggested dyeing her hair back to brown, but she insisted she wants lighter hair. That's when she says the best course of action is to go blonde. I freak and tell her there's better ways to solve this, but she's made up her mind. She goes blonde that evening, and we're back to being identical. She's up to her old tricks and is furious when my fiancé Brandon proposes. She knew it was coming and tried to get me out of the way so he could accidentally propose to her instead. Her plan didn't work, and I started planning my wedding with Brandon. He says he doesn't want Emma to be part of the wedding party. Neither do I. I make my best friend my maid of honor, and Emma goes ballistic. She complains to my parents, she complains to me, she complains to my best friend, she'd complain to the whole world if she could. The wedding planning goes perfectly. So the day of the wedding comes, and everything is almost perfect. I just need to put my dress on. My best friend comes into the room panicking that my wedding dress is gone. What the hell does she mean it's gone? She says the rest of the bridal party is out looking for it, calling anyone necessary to check our houses to see if we left it at home. My best friend swears she didn't forget it, but things don't just vanish. The wedding march starts playing, and I tell my best friend to go tell them I'm not ready, so the wedding needs to be delayed. But she screams when she sees what's happening. I run up to her and see none other than Emma in my wedding dress. I don't know how they proceeded the wedding without the bridal party there. She walks down the aisle and holds my fiancé's hand. Like hell she's getting away with this. I march in there, but don't get far before my dad starts holding me back and saying, I will not ruin Annabelle's, my name, wedding. I tell him I'm Annabelle, but he doesn't believe me. At this point, everyone is watching us because I'm screaming at my dad and fighting to get past him. Emma starts hysterically crying, saying that even now I'm still trying to ruin things for her. I ask them why in the world I would start my wedding without my bridal party. Emma says they were occupied holding me back from ruining her wedding. My best friend walks in and says, Emma is trying to marry the groom. This right here is Annabelle. Emma calls bullshit and tells the officiant to continue on with the wedding. I get past my dad, run to Emma, and attack her. I slap her, take off the veil, pull at her hair. Nothing I'm proud of, but I've had enough of her trying to steal my life. Brandon gets me off her eventually and asks me to prove my innocence. I tell him the story of how we met, how he asked me out, whisper him his secrets, and tell him just about anything only both of us know to try and convince him. He kisses me, showing me he believes me, and Emma yells at me to get away from him. Brandon announces that he was about to marry the wrong twin because Emma disguised herself as me. He tells his best man to escort Emma out. An hour later, I got married to Brandon. Emma is no longer welcomed in our lives and Brandon is not up for grabs.
My husband is praying that I die. My husband and I are expecting our first child, which I knew would be a really sensitive issue as his own mother died in childbirth with him. We met with a marriage counselor to talk things through at the beginning, and he swears he's been seeing his own therapist twice a month throughout my pregnancy. I don't want to call him a liar, but I'm fairly sure he's either not going or not talking about the big issue. He and his father, a hugely active part of our lives, are completely convinced that I'm going to die in childbirth. They won't openly admit it, but their behavior has reached the point where it's constantly making me feel stressed and uncomfortable. When it was husband saying please make sure your life insurance is up to date and I'd like you to meet with a lawyer and draft a will, I was like that's kind of intense but okay, if that makes you feel better. When husband asked me to go through all of my possessions and inventory what I wanted to be saved for the baby versus what I would want to be returned to my family in the event of my death, I put my foot down and said absolutely not. Too morbid. No way. My father-in-law, who lives a few blocks away and eats dinner with us 2 to 4 nights a week, got on my case about how I was making things difficult for my husband in the event that he will be a grieving widower with a newborn. I'm just gonna add here that I've had a completely complication-free pregnancy and have no reason to think I will die screaming in the coming weeks. When I tell my husband this, he calls me paranoid, but I feel like my father-in-law wants me to die. His whole life identity for the past 35 years has been amazing single dad, never dated or had close friends or even hobbies really, and it seems like he's looking forward to being able to guide my husband through what he went through. At this point, I'd honestly be happy to never see my father-in-law again, and I certainly don't want him in the delivery room, especially since he told me he was putting his foot down about me not being allowed to have an epidural or laughing gas. He's a commanding presence and I know that whatever he wants in the delivery room, he will get. I know people will say L&D nurses would never let that happen. But you haven't met this man. My husband, in addition to backing his dad on everything, acts like my due date is my death date, and is completely pulled away from me. Every minute with him is morbid, stressful, and a reminder that our marriage seems to be crumbling. No matter how many times I tell him his behavior makes me stressed and upset, it's just getting worse, and I do not want it around me while I'm concentrating on giving birth. Do I owe it to my husband to let him stress and upset me during labor? Is his presence at the birth more important than a safe and healthy delivery? My therapist says no, but this whole thing has been so weird I feel like I need some outside perspective. What are the craziest fan posts? Viewer submitted stories. Am I the a-hole for calling another girl hot in front of my girlfriend? A couple of summers ago, I had a short relationship that lasted a little longer than a week. Before you ask why it was so little time, I was 13 at the time and serious relationships lasting more than a few months was not what was expected at that time. Anyways, every summer I go to a music camp in Michigan for around 4 to 6 weeks. This time, it'd been already going for 3 weeks, so I had 3 weeks left. FYI, this is a boarding camp, so your parents send you there and you live there in a cabin with 8 to 16 other kids of the same sex with 2 counselors. There are 2 sessions in these 6 weeks, the first and the second, both being split into 3 weeks. I was there for both, but some of my cabin mates were not, so at the 3-week mark, new people were moving in the cabin. I was helping around when I noticed someone new who was very pretty and overall a nice person. I'll call her C. C was very outgoing, kind, and had my same type of humor. If you don't know, I'm a girl, and so is C. I'm openly identifying as a lesbian at this time, and when I met her properly, my gaydar went off. I could tell she was fruity, and I knew she was going to be one of those girls I'd crush on forever. However, when I asked about her sexuality, she said she was straight, and that she had a boyfriend. I was rather surprised to hear this, but as we talked more, it turns out she had dated girls before, and it was just a bad experience for her. After about a week of crushing on her, we had started getting really close. We often cuddled in the hammock near our cabin with other people, but we were always the closest together. One day, we were sitting in the hammock together with another person, who was also openly lesbian, and me and C were holding hands. The other person asked about it, while raising an eyebrow, and me and C both flushed red. She confessed to having feelings, and I was in shock, but I agreed and said the same. Later that night, we talked through boundaries and she said no kissing and I was totally fine with that. Over the week, we would start sneaking out of our bunks to cuddle with each other late at night, and I'll admit, a bit of touching happened, but nothing below the waist. She ended up breaking up with her boyfriend, who she said she only dated because she felt bad and didn't want to lose him as a friend. They both ended up fine, but about a day later is when it all went downhill. All of our division headed to see a concert on campus, and we watched many people perform, many of who were our own division members. When a group of dancers came on stage, I pointed out that someone on stage was hot, someone who was significantly older and we could not ever be in a relationship. 2 was coming from a celebrity crush-like perspective, like they are attractive but I wouldn't date them kind of thing. But it must have come out wrong, because C got very upset. I apologized profusely, but none were accepted, so we stayed in silence for the rest of the show. As we walked back to our cabin, we didn't interact at all. She avoided me when we arrived, and when we finally got to our bunks, I wrote her a letter on a piece of paper and apologized many times and asked if Ahe was okay. She wrote me back a very angry letter, saying things such as, "You know I'm sensitive and you're being a real shithead." I wrote another letter apologizing again and I almost couldn't read the paper from how much my tears had stained it. It really hurt to be honest, and I hated myself for saying that at the concert. Geez, was after a horrible time in my life where I had attempted to off myself and had been cutting for a bit. I had finally started to heal, but this brought me down. She decided to forgive me and we hugged and cried in each other's arms a lot that night. The next day, she decided to call her mom and talk to her about breaking up with her boyfriend and dating me. I heard this from a friend of hers, because she wouldn't speak to me directly, but apparently her mother basically called her a whore. I was shocked to hear this, and her friend sat me down to talk to me and say that if C were to break up with me, it's not my fault, because C is just having a tough time right now. I was expecting it, but it hurt to hear. Me and her friend talked for a little before her friend started trauma dumping on me about how her dad died and her mom left. I honestly didn't know how to deal with this situation, so I sat and listened. After she was done, C came up to Howard to take them both to the health center to calm down and get some water. I kind of sat there in shock for a bit. Later that night, C wrote me a letter that in short said, "I think we have to break up. I'm sorry to do this to you, but I'm not stable enough to have a relationship right now. I'm going to be honest." I cried. I cried a lot that night. But eventually I wrote her back saying that I understand, and we hugged after. Around an hour after that, I still hadn't fallen asleep when I hear her get up out of bed and head to the bathroom. I heard muffled sobbing and the rustling of paper towels being pulled from the dispenser. I'm still not sure what happened, but I got up to go to the bathroom with a flashlight, and as I left the stall I saw her for a split second in the corner. There was what looked like smudged blood on her thighs and something in her hand. I panicked and ran back to my bunk. It was all a blur. I'm assuming she did something to herself, and I'm afraid that I'd caused it. After that I hear my counselor rush down the cabin and bring her out to the health center. I talked to her very little the last week of camp. I hope she's doing better now. I've got a good life now with my current girlfriend, but I wish C the best. Am I the a-hole?
My new boyfriend wants me to cut off my own mom. My boyfriend and I have been dating for about 2 months. I'm a barista and he was a regular and asked me out. I had a little crush on him and I was excited when he asked me out since I've never gone on a date or had a boyfriend before. He is slightly older than me. I just turned 19 and my boyfriend is 28. He's a really smart guy with a good career and I felt so grown up when we got together. He's really loving and observant and a great boyfriend, even though he always talks about how he had a really bad home life and he doesn't talk to his abusive parents anymore. I really admired that he could still grow up into such a well-adjusted person after being treated so poorly by his parents when he was growing up. Like I said, he's really open about his past and I comfort him a lot when he's talking about his childhood. My family life is much different. My parents were immigrants and my dad died of alcoholism the year after I was born and my mom raised me on her own. She worked so hard to give me a good life and the older I got the more I realized I wanted to give her back all the support she had always given me. Now that I'm an adult, we are still really close and we talk every day. I call my mom once a day, mostly at nighttime, and I'll text her here and there throughout the day. It was so hard to leave her living alone when I moved out to live on my own in my first apartment. I love my mom with all my heart and I'm happy we're so close. I feel blessed to have been raised by her. But the more time me and my boyfriend spend together, the more comments he's been making about my relationship with my mom. It started small, like one time I called my mom to say goodnight while I was at his house, and he rolled his eyes and made huffing noises the whole time I was on the phone. The next morning he seemed really distant and annoyed. It might sound like I communicate often with my mom, but I'm not rude when I use my phone. I only text my mom or others when I have a private moment, and there's only been a couple of times when my boyfriend and I have been hanging out and I called my mom to say goodnight, the call only taking 2 minutes max. Even though I knew I was closer to my mom than most people are, I never really thought our communication was over the top. I thought a lot of people like talking to their parents every day. I've been feeling confused since my boyfriend sat me down this week and told me he thinks my mom is codependent on me, and that it's not good for me to talk to her that often. He said that if I actually cared about her independence, I wouldn't spend so much time on the phone with her. I told him that my mom was getting older, and she lived alone, so she's just on my mind often, and I love her. My boyfriend said if I really loved her I would be more distant, since that would be better for me too. He said that she was toxic for expecting me to talk to her every single day. When he first said all this, I thought he might be joking or something. It just sounded crazy to me. But then my mom called me literally as he was talking, and he took my phone off of the couch and ended the call himself. I don't know, my boyfriend is really mature and has a college degree. I feel like he might understand more about life than me, so maybe he is right. More than anything, I want to do what's best for my mom. I don't want to smother her. But I love her so much, and it would feel weird and wrong to ignore her for even a day. I have no idea what to do, but I don't want to upset either of them since I love them both. What is the most dangerous thing your pet has ever done? I learned soon after getting my German Shepherd puppy that I was a complete effing idiot to get such a large breed as a first-time pet owner. Don't get me wrong. I love my boy Leo. He ran straight to me the day I picked him up. He wakes me up every day with kisses, and I do love coming home to his happy dances. But at the same time, the list of things I have to train him to do feels never-ending and overwhelming. Although he slowly got better when it came to things like potty training and walking on the leash, even after 6 months, trying to get his nails cut has been a disaster. He's very sensitive about his feet, even when all I'm doing is wiping off the mud from his paws. He just starts whining and pulls it back. That being said, nothing could have prepared me for the very first time I took him to a groomer. By that point, his nails were curled and I noticed him whining and chewing on them at night. I finally decided to take him for a walk-in nail trim at my local PetSmart, and the girl behind the counter was gentle as she put him right on her table in front of me. But to my horror, I watched my usually sweet boy turn into a total monster right before my eyes. I had never seen him like that. She leaned down next to him trying to talk comfortingly in her ear, but the second she touched his foot he bucked his head straight up into her jaw and tried snapping at her face. My heart almost stopped as I realized that if she had pulled away a second too late he would have literally ripped a chunk of her face out. Even though he was still a puppy, Leo weighed about 50 pounds at the time and his teeth are gigantic and sharp. I just kept thanking her and apologizing as I took him back. I gave Leo a break for a couple of days after that. During that time I watched a video on how to cut your dog's nails at home, and it seemed easy enough. I thought he might behave better for me, his mom, despite his behavior at the groomers, which in hindsight was pretty stupid. I bought a pair of doggy nail clippers from Amazon, put some peanut butter on the wall to distract him, and tried my best to cut his nails a week later. I tried to clip his nails at home, only actually managing to cut 2 of them as he kicked and growled at me with all his might. I could barely keep a grip on his paw, and it took me a second too long to realize that I had made both of the nails I had cut bleed. It was awful. I started crying and so did Leo. He kept licking his hurt paw and whining as I tried to stop the bleeding with a towel and band-aids, but nothing was working. Even after 10 minutes of me cleaning and dabbing his nails, he couldn't walk around without trailing blood from his foot. I felt like such a terrible dog owner, and at that point, I didn't know what else to do but rush him to the vet. It was maybe 9 p.m. and the only 24-hour emergency vet was 40 minutes away. When we finally got there, we had to wait another half hour in the lobby. The anxiety of that night almost broke me. When they finally took him I could hear him immediately misbehaving for the vet techs and I felt bad for them. They had to put him under anesthesia and ordered to clip the rest of his nails, and with the emergency fees my bill ended up being almost $400. It was half of my paycheck, and if the bill had been any higher I might not have made my rent the next month. I cried while driving home that night, not knowing what the hell I was gonna do if I had to pay nearly $400 to get my puppy's nails clipped. I spent a couple of days feeling bad for myself after that crappy night, but eventually I realized I needed to stop feeling like a victim and be a better parent to my baby. I decided to do some research, and even called around to get quotes from other vets on nail clippings, but shockingly I couldn't find a single vet in my area that would clip his nails under anesthesia for less than $150. I couldn't afford that and that. I had no other choice but to find a way to clip them at home. Even if the last time had gone so poorly, at least I knew I needed to take some precautions. After doing more research, I found a lot of info from other pet parents in situations almost exactly like mine, and I decided to buy 2 simple solutions based on everything I had read. I bought some styptic powder to pack into injured nails, and a pair of medical dog boots to wrap his foot up and stop any bleeding. It broke my heart to stress my baby out like that again, but I tried my absolute best to cut his nails at home even though he fought like a demon all over again. I did end up cutting a couple of them too short, but this time I stayed calm. It was hard, yet I managed to put a bit of the powder on the bleeding nails and wrap them up in the soft dog boot. As soon as I wrapped his foot up, Leo seemed to calm down and start licking my hand. I kept the little boots on him for maybe an hour, and almost cried from relief when I took them off to see not a single spot of blood anywhere on his feet or nails. After that successful night, Leo and I got into a routine of cutting his nails in the same way every 2 weeks, and every time he calmed down a tiny bit more, and every time the medical dog boots healed any bleeding in the blink of an eye. As much as I love my sweet Leo boy, I can't help but think about how much money I saved on vet or groomer bills. After he had suffered so badly at the groomers and the vets, not to mention how my wallet suffered, I was so relieved to have finally found a solution to what felt like an impossible task. All I wanted was to be able to maintain his nails. His health is the most important thing in the world to me, And when it looked like I might not be able to do that, it scared the hell out of me. I'm just so grateful for the both of us that I was able to find his silly little medical dog boots, and be able to cut his nails at home where he feels safest.
Steal my boyfriend, I'll vandalize your car. A while back, my boyfriend of 4 years was on the verge of inheriting some money from a distant relative. It was supposed to be a turning point for us. But about a week before he was set to receive that windfall, I walked into our bedroom and found him sharing our bed with a woman we both knew, a woman I'd rather forget. It was his spineless way of ending things, avoiding a difficult conversation. Throughout our relationship, I had been the primary breadwinner, supporting his dreams of becoming the next musical sensation, even though his chances were slimmer than a toothpick. He made life unbearable, forcing me to move out, despite the fact that I had found our flat and paid the rent. Eventually, he got his inheritance, and his first order of business was to whisk his new flame away on a lavish Mediterranean vacation. My blood boiled with rage. When they returned, she decided to splurge on a brand new car. To make matters worse, he refused to repay me the money he owed. They had the audacity to show up at my new place and lecture me about discussing his debts with others, even though he was undoubtedly in the wrong. One night, my flatmate and I, disguised in wigs and filled with determination, hatched a plan to seek some sort of revenge. At 2 a.m., we snuck out to her pristine white VW Golf. We hadn't planned what to write, and panic set in. In the end, all I managed to spray paint was "wankers ha ha ha" on the passenger side. We dashed back home, a fit of giggles serving as our alibi. It took her a day or two to even notice the message on her car. Strangely, my ex-boyfriend never had the guts to tell her the truth, opting for cowardice as always. It was a mutual friend who finally spilled the beans. The friend spotted her driving around, laughed, and couldn't help but reveal the cheeky graffiti on her car. Entitled woman let her dog shit on the airport floor, so I shit on her travel plans. While walking to my gate at LAX, I noticed a woman whose dog was in the middle of doing its business. The woman was loudly FaceTiming with her back to the dog, so I assumed she didn't notice. That was likely the thought shared by the gentleman who tried to get her attention. "Excuse me, miss?" he said, in a polite tone. The woman glared at him. "Your dog," he sheepishly continued, pointing to the mid-poop pup. The woman rolled her eyes and went back to FaceTime as the man slinked away, seemingly embarrassed. "Some people," she bellowed to her FaceTime companion with no hint of irony, "are just so damned rude." When her dog finished, the woman started walking away, leaving everything right on the airport floor. Another woman tried to stop her. "You're not going to clean that up?" she asked, as shocked as the rest of us were. "They have people for that," the offender replied, disappearing into the crowd, as much as someone yelling into their phone can disappear into a crowd. I stood near the pile and warned people to walk around it while someone else got a maintenance worker's attention. No one said anything. We were so shocked that anyone could be that horrible. When I got to my gate, the woman was there, too. Great, we were both going to Tokyo. When I travel abroad, I get embarrassed by other Americans doing things 100 times less embarrassing than leaving animal feces on the floor of an airport. To make it worse, her dog was now barking at everyone who walked by. I have nothing against people flying with their dogs, I do it often. But it is a privilege I take seriously. My dog is well trained and behaves better than most people. He certainly behaves better than that asshole. Speaking of assholes, there is a pet relief area inside LAX Pass security, just 2 gates away from where the party pooper let her dog go to town. It didn't matter, she was the type of person to litter 3 feet from an empty garbage can. While her dog barked at the world, the woman had moved from FaceTiming with no headphones to listening to music with no headphones. I don't like to throw around the word sociopath, but I don't know how else I could explain just how selfish and terrible of a person she was. I bet her car was somewhere in long-term parking, parked across 3 spots with paint on the bumper from the child's bike she hit without leaving a note. Everyone else tried to ignore her, sitting as far away from her as they could. I am not everyone else. I sat down right next to the horrible woman. "Are you going to London on business?" I said. "I'm going to Tokyo," she responded gruffly, annoyed that I interrupted her DJing. "Oh," I said, "then you better hurry. That flight got moved to gate 53C. This is the flight to London." I figured I could give her a little moment of panic as payback for how terribly she was treating everyone. I didn't predict what would happen next. She grabbed her bags and her dog in a huff, and stormed out of the gate without even checking. She was so self-involved, she didn't notice that the monitor at our gate still said Tokyo and almost everyone at the gate was Japanese. Based on her actions, she believed me that the fight had been moved, so she's also an asshole for not thanking me. Some people, I thought as I watched her rush away from the gate without stopping her, are just so damned rude. The flight to Tokyo was at gate 69A, so the 53 gates were on the other side of the next terminal, and I felt guilty knowing she probably berated some poor clerk who had to explain to her that there was no gate 53C. I don't know if she made it back to this flight before we took off or not, but I didn't see her board and I don't hear her dog. Her missing her flight was not my original intention, but it would be a fine punishment for her being so rude to everyone and making a low-paid stranger clean feces off the floor. What makes me wonder if I went too far is the knowledge that Delta only has 1 flight to Tokyo each day. Whoops, maybe she can rebook on another airline. I hear they have people for that.
Instead of his plan of proposing, my boyfriend broke up with me and went off the rails. I was just forced to cancel my August 2-week Mexico vacation with my boyfriend of 4 years because he was planning to propose, told all our friends, parents, co-workers and my boss, who pushed me to take the time off because apparently he'd known for several months now. He had a link to the exact ring in his phone for 2 years. He asked me to send it a long time ago as we have discussed marriage down the line with no hard expectations on timeline or how he does it or whatever. It was a platinum lab diamond oval, all pre-chosen, so he only had to click order. He just contacted the jeweler who told him the lead time is at least 3 weeks, up to 7. It also says this word for word on the ring's webpage. Obviously, our vacation was supposed to start in less than 3 weeks. Here's the thing, I didn't know about the proposal and he didn't want me to find out. So, he freaked out at home a couple nights ago and just told me to cancel everything. I was shocked and asked him to triple confirm that's what he wants me to do. I booked it all through my travel card and he confirmed. We got in a huge fight over it because I couldn't understand where this was coming from, and parts of it were non-refundable, so we likely can't rebook it as it was at a later date due to cost and timing with work. The fight continued through yesterday with him breaking up with me in a moment of rage, and me saying I will follow through with that and move out if that's what he really wants. He said he wasn't sure. He took a moment, still angry, and then he spilled the beans about the proposal and his contacting the jeweler. But he said it's too little too late because we got in this huge fight and he broke up with me. And now he didn't like how matter-of-fact I was being about the breakup. I was in shock, upset and in the dark about the entire why behind him wanting to cancel the vacation entirely, which I think was stupid because he could have proposed with a string and I would have been elated, and then we could have received the ring when we returned. We didn't speak the rest of last night and he left for work quietly this morning. Apparently, he left work early today for a lunch/happy hour with his team and stayed out. He sent me a weird text at 4 p.m. basically restating our breakup to confirm his stance, and he never came home tonight. I texted him at 1:30 a.m. asking if he's being safe at least for the sake of his kids and he replied with a thumbs up on my text to him. He likely left co-workers in the afternoon around the time he texted me and met up with someone else to stay the night with, and I honestly don't know if it's a friend or another woman he met while out drinking all day at this point. 2 reasons. 1, he's kind of a flirt, especially when drunk, and 2, his 4 p.m. text felt like a cop-out so he can go do whatever he wants if you know what I mean. I have no idea what state he'll be in when he returns home, and at this point I can't trust anything he might say about his whereabouts for the past 17 hours. I can't believe our relationship is over because of this.
Am I the ass because I ate more than my share of a 6-foot party sub last night? I'm a big fat ass, there's no way around it. I love to eat, which probably borders on addiction, but I figure since I'm only hurting myself, it's probably better to just live my life. I have some great friends, although there is no doubt I'm the harmless, funny token fat guy of the otherwise pretty good looking group. I guess that sets the stage enough. Last night my friend hosted UFC and I was invited. He got a 6-foot party sub. I also brought homemade wings that are sort of my specialty. Well, of course people flocked to the food and I had basically one serving of the sandwich, but people devoured my wings and I didn't get to have a single one. Which is totally fine, that's why I brought them. But maybe an hour later I was starving. I kept eyeing the sandwich and I'd say there was about 3 feet of it left. I waited an hour, then another half hour and no one had touched it, but they were still munching on chips, pretzels, and whatnot, so I was like screw it. I took about half of what was left and ate it. Then the last half sat for another 10 to 15 minutes and no one said anything, so I ate the rest. Well, to be sure, as I was swallowing the last bite the host's girlfriend asked where the sandwich was. Like I was the guilty party, pretty much everyone pointed at me. I guess they'd noticed me eating the sandwich. She was furious and said that I was an incredible pig and that I had been super selfish to eat 3 feet of a sandwich. I felt so bad I tried to explain to her that I really did wait over an hour and thought people had lost interest. I also tried to explain how everyone had eaten my wings and she said something along the lines of, "You brought them to share, Alan. If someone had eaten over half by themselves, that's not effing sharing, is it?" I offered to order pizza or even go get Subways and she said that it was a pathetic offer because the party sub had been from a local shop owned by her friends. I said I was sorry, but the night was so tense from then on out. I woke up this morning to several texts from my twin sisters, the host's girlfriend's best friends, saying that I had to get my stuff under control and that everyone is really mad at me, and that I embarrassed myself last night. I tried to explain to them what my mindset had been and they haven't responded. Was I the asshole for eating that much of the sandwich last night? What is the pettiest reason you can't date someone? My boss's daughter's ex-boyfriend broke up with her because they had a Dyson and he said he wouldn't be able to keep up with her extravagant lifestyle. She had the same name as my mom. His last name was Pfister. Pfister? I barely know her. Rectum? Damn near killed him. She ate pizza with her hands. No, not like you think. She would scoop up the toppings in a messy pile and like an animal, claw them up and eat them, then rip the bread and eat it. We were at a fancy Italian place and I got horrified. He ate with closed fists around his utensils like a toddler and his face right up to his food like someone was going to steal it. I had a guy break up with me in high school because God told him to. I was like, oh, okay, guess I can't argue with that one. I broke up with a pretty hot girl when I was younger because she didn't swing her arms when she walked. It just looked weird and reminded me of a gorilla. Really stupid reason, I know, but it just looked so stupid and I couldn't overcome it. I feel like my long-term boyfriend isn't happy because he's not as knowledgeable as me and everything anymore. My boyfriend has been together since 2016. He was a grade above me and was more knowledgeable than I was. He is someone I looked up to then, and I still do, but in a different way. After a year of college he dropped out, but I stayed in college. We moved in together, and he is working full-time to provide my living expenses. I am taking care of my own schooling, but everything else he takes care of financially. Up until a year ago I was taking classes he already took, so I would ask him for help and it was great. I am going into environmental science, and all my classes left are all science-based classes. Once I started taking my chemistry classes, he was no longer able to help me. I made more friends in my field, and we created a study group. Well, I've noticed that anytime he makes a comment about science, like pH levels, climate change, renewable and non-renewable resources, geological, etc., he'll get half of it right, but then will say something that doesn't make sense. Example is that he said we should be consuming water with a pH of 2 or less, when all water is 7, and anything below 6 is too acidic for people to consume. When I pointed out my confusion, he got upset, and put his foot down that he was right. I pushed a bit more, then he started to ignore me. He then admitted after a few minutes of silence that he was upset because he was wrong. So I assume he Googled it. Anyway, I've started to realize the same pattern. He will get defensive and immediately shut me down if I voice that he is incorrect about something. I don't want to admit you're wrong, but it kinda hurts. He makes it seem like I think I'm smarter than him, but that's not the case. Academically I may be smarter, but he is smart in every other aspect. He's not dumb, and he's honestly one of the most intelligent people I've ever met. I used to love talking about new things or science stuff with him, but now I feel he may see it as me bragging now. I don't know how to go about talking about my interest in science anymore to him without him feeling like I'm calling him dumb. I just find it fascinating and want to share it with him. I found a disturbing yoga stream. If I stop watching, I can't save her. I found her stream a month ago. It caught my eye. It was a simple shot of her face, so near to the camera that I could count the freckles. Her teeth a little too large for her mouth and her nose ever so slightly crooked. I've never been the type of guy to consider yoga, but I tuned in, and in a matter of seconds, I was entranced. The girl was in her living room, a haphazard mise-en-scène, the floor speckled with sad little plants and stacks of magazines. She posed with her hands on the floor and her hips thrust in the air. Her butt perched in the center of the screen. I decided to stay a while. I had no yoga mat, so I laid out a towel. It was difficult to follow along. She talked, a lot, and only a fraction of it was about the routine. Press your heels together and bend your head to your feet, breathing deeply. My feet smell like peaches and cream today. Makes me want to gobble them up. I love summer peaches. I love biting into them and feeling the juice erupt in my mouth. It reminds me of the time when, and I fell into the meditative quagmire woven by her words, inhaling the scent of my own socks, failing to notice she'd moved into a different pose. After a while, my muscles trembled with the effort of supporting my soft body in these unfamiliar positions, so I called it a day. It was then that I noticed it. Subscribers. 1. That was me. I was the only one watching. I felt an inexplicable flood of guilt when I closed the browser, like I was abandoning her. I checked back into her channel the next few afternoons. It was the strangest thing. She was always streaming. She was either unaware of my presence, or apathetic to it. Her ramblings, so freewheeling that they approached random word association, didn't seem to change whether I was there or not. She was often mid-sentence when I logged in. She was flirty in a way that made it clear she wasn't trying to be, charmingly raw in her tendency to fumble instructions. Curiosity overwhelmed me. I yearned to discover more about this fascinating creature. Her movements drew me in, like she was grasping at me through the screen. I marveled at the feeling of being her silent voyeur. I developed more comfort with the basic poses, though I still couldn't get my hands anywhere near my toes. Too soon, she notched up the level of difficulty. She eased herself into the splits. Each leg outstretched, her toes pointed at perfect right angles. I tried my best to replicate the pose, my groin protesting the pressure. Each day, she pushed a little farther. She curved her spine sharply behind her, a graceful arc. She lifted her back leg high into the air at an angle that seemed to wrench her hip out of place. I forced my body into the closest approximations of her geometry that my tendons would allow. My teeth gritted against the sharp warnings issued by my nerves. At night I dreamed that she was breaking my joints, cracking my limbs into the clean shapes that she maintained so effortlessly. One day she twisted her arms so far behind her that I felt sympathetic pain, and folded herself up so that her bent legs swooped around her shoulders, touching her toes behind her neck. She smiled at the camera, demurely, politely. "You want to see me bend into a pretzel, don't you?" she asked. That was the first time she addressed me. I would forget to eat. I'd wake up on the couch, having dozed off, and she would be murmuring about pomegranates while her forehead brushed her knees. Did she sleep? Did she eat? I saw no evidence of it. Every time I moved, my body ached with the memory of being stretched to its limit. I was spending 10, 12, 14 hours a day on her stream. She spoke to me frequently. "I know you've been watching me. I think you like watching me. How far do you want me to twist for you?" The fluid shifting of her body into vertices and curves and delicate polygons was hypnotizing. I was getting lost in the light of a flickering flame as it swirled into different patterns. I was working myself into something more pliable, molding myself into something like her image. It's difficult to pinpoint the moment she went too far. It was more like the creep of quicksand than any one single point. She would lie on her back and lift herself on the palms and soles of her feet, her torso thrusting at the ceiling like she was something from The Exorcist. She would inch her hands and feet closer together, folding her body backwards on itself until she was nearly split in half. And then she would skitter forward until the whites of her eyes flooded the screen, scaring me so much that I jumped. And she would laugh, as if she had made a joke. She would twist her head around like an owl, and thrust it between her thighs. Always blinking at the screen. Always smiling like we were sharing some inside secret, like I was in on the sly conspiracy. She said, "You like this, don't you, Mr. Smith? Am I your foldable pocket toy?" Smith is a very common last name. There was a non-zero chance she just guessed correctly. But this freaked me out enough to slam the laptop shut, shattering the image of her toothy smile. I tried to resume normal life. but I had almost nothing to fill my time except television and social media and filling out applications for jobs I'd never want to work. A strange sensation tickled at me, like something was wrong, like I was forgetting something. And powerful waves of guilt, the same guilt I'd felt when I closed her stream the first day I'd found her. I tried not to. I really tried to stay away. But the urge overwhelmed me, so I returned. For the first time, she wasn't on screen when I logged in. I peered closer at the scene, seeing the familiar yoga mat on the ground, the coffee table, the magazines. There was a soft noise coming from just off screen, a muffled noise, irregular and halting. A human voice. I turned the volume all the way up, and I couldn't tell if it was laughter or crying. Feeling sick, I closed the stream. This brings us to yesterday. I had spent countless hours thinking about her, wondering what she was doing, whether she was still telling stories to her invisible visitor. I logged in. Her eyes filled the webcam's field of vision, so suddenly that I scrambled backwards. And that sound, echoing around the walls of her apartment and mine, and it was now clear that it was a sound of misery. Her moan was wordless, and as her face backed away, I saw why. Her bare foot was stuffed halfway in her mouth, her jaw nearly unhinged to accommodate it, the ball wedged between her teeth. Tears were streaming down her face, pooling around the corners of her stretched lips. Her arms were folded behind her head and her other leg was tucked under the first. She was struggling, and I realized that she was stuck. She was trapped in that position, a twisted ball of limbs and strained joints, unable to speak. I stared slack-jawed at the screen, and her eyes met mine, seeming to blink in recognition. The force of her sobs crescendoed. In relief? I wasn't sure. I had no idea what to do. I didn't know her name or where she lived. I didn't even know for sure that she was in the same country. I sat, frozen, for long moments, watching the twitching of her limbs as she tried to wrench herself out of the cage her body made. Then it struck me, I could type. Can you type your address? The message pinged its arrival at her computer. Our first real communication. She shook her head almost imperceptibly, with the slight range of motion her position allowed. I tried again. Can you type with your nose? Her eyes flickered across the page as she read my words. With great effort she rocked herself over, landing face first on the keyboard. Sivio Shuso, she typed. My heart pounding, I said, try again. I watched as she managed to prop herself precariously on one shoulder. Her body was convulsing with the force of her sobs. Eventually, she leaned forward, carefully, delicately, and pressed the tip of her nose to the keys. 3, yes. That was it. That's great. Give me another number. We traded for long, suspenseful minutes, her giving me one number or letter at a time, me writing them down and encouraging her as best I could. You're doing great. I'm here with you. Help is on the way. She had cobbled together a number and a street. It had taken us nearly an hour to get to this point. She had just finished typing app 12 when she stopped, trembling with the effort of keeping herself upright, and we met eyes again through the camera, her shining with pain and fear. And then she collapsed. She rolled out of sight. Panicking, I sent her dozens of frantic messages. What city? What state? Stay with me. I'm here. Where are you? I need more. It became clear that no more was coming. Her sobs stilled, her breath quieted. I searched the address and found every city in the country where the address she'd given me existed. I called every police station in every jurisdiction within range. It took a lot of explanation, but after hours of work there was nothing I could do but sit and wait nervously by the phone and stare at the empty apartment framed within my laptop screen. All I could do was type. I'm here with you. You'll be safe. This will be over soon. You're not alone. The ringing of the phone nearly sent me out of my skin. It was 1 a.m. Did you find her? I asked desperately, scanning the scene for any sign of activity. Tell me she's alright. The voice on the other end of the line sighed, a deep sigh, of sadness or frustration I couldn't say. We found her, he said, his words gentle but guarded. Stuck in that position, as you described. She's not okay. She died of dehydration. What? No. That's not possible. I just spoke to her. I don't know what you saw, son. I truly don't. But the girl we found has been dead for a month. My spoiled stepdaughter hopes I get the virus so that I can die. I have pre-existing conditions and I think she's going to purposely get sick to unalive me. So I have a stepdaughter who is 14. I've been with her mother since she was 4. She doesn't see her biological father at all, his choice, and he has played no role in her life. I'm the only father figure she's really had other than her grandfather. We used to be fairly close, up until she was around 12 or so, and then it was like someone had flipped a switch. She's constantly disrespectful, says hurtful things like she wishes I was dead, and even goes to great lengths to avoid seeing me or being near me. She is only ever nice to me if I have something she needs or wants, like money, or if I'm making her food or something. So her school called our house phone today to see how she was and made sure she had all she needed to do her schoolwork as we are back in lockdown. She brought the phone back in to me after the call and I asked if everything was okay. We had a semi-normal conversation for a change until she said she wanted to go back to school. I told her she couldn't as her mum is extremely vulnerable and if she got the virus and passed it to her she would get extremely ill. SD, if I passed it to you would you survive? Me, I don't know SD, well I hope you get it and don't, then you won't be around anymore. I've spoken to my wife repeatedly about the things she says and she has spoken to her but the response she gets is that my stepdaughter hates me and always has and any time she's been with me, like when I took her to the football or went out geocaching with her, she was faking enjoying spending time with me, and all those times in the past when she said she wants to call me dad was fake too. It breaks my heart. I feel like I've done something to change her view of me but I don't know what she won't say. She won't give a reason why she says she hates me and she always has. I tend to stay out of her way. To avoid it all which makes me sad and causes tension with my wife sometimes. Is this normal behavior? My wife says it's normal teen girl lashing out behavior but even her friends have pulled her up on it when they've been around in the past and heard what she says to me. I tend to let it slide mostly, but that virus thing, that was harsh. What is hell on earth? My friend's stepfather roped him ever since he was 6 until around his 8th year. His biological father died of a work-related accident and his mother married this stepfather that she knew from her hometown a few years after. That fatherly figure soon turned out to be a monster that was eager to put his hands on anything that moves. My friend's mother was unaware of what the stepfather was doing, as the stepfather threatened to take my friend's life as well as his mother's life if my friend told anyone what was going on. He was in an ever worse situation after getting bullied. He wanted to take his life, but his mother was the only reason he didn't want to do it, and kept pushing on through it all. He started slowly making a few friends that helped him cope a little. On his 10th birthday he was left limping after his stepfather went all out on him in the worst possible way. He was forced to go to school the day after and was unable to sit at all, unable to move, but he endured it and shrugged it off as an accident so that no one finds out what happens. He saw what the man can do. He doesn't want his mother hurt or worse because he told on this monster. Even the bullies stopped making fun of him after seeing that he didn't care anymore about what they did to him. More uninterested in bullying an inanimate object than pity. A few older senior students who were a mix of 16 and 18-year-old caught up to what happened and pulled him aside one day to ask what happened. They all sat down and talked. Although they knew what was happening, they merely asked to confirm what's going on. My friend who told them to not spread it as it means life and death to him and especially his mother let out all the information out of pure fear from about 5 or 6 behemoths towering around him. The seniors were not amused. Not one bit. They were all hellbent on making this man regret his life choices, and make him regret it they did. They stalked him, cornered him and afterwards went completely berserk on him, putting stuff into his back door and laying into his manhood until a sac exploded. He was rushed to the hospital. Both his sacs were ruptured and are damaged beyond salvation. His back door was ripped to the size of a 22-centimeter ball, and he lost about 70% of his teeth. They caught him at the brink of death and managed to keep him alive somehow. The next day they told his mom of what happened, and what he did to him. She wasn't just filing for divorce. She took everything he ever owned, all the money he made, and afterwards had him put behind bars. With a little birdie that told every inmate inside of what he did. Last he heard of him was that he was being used quite literally as the prison's soap dispenser while in the pen. He came out roaming the streets, shunned by everyone, and they still regularly tell people of who he is and what he did to publicly shame him for what he did, losing him any job possible and barred from many establishments, and was regularly hissed at and yelled at to go away like a stray dog. There was no mercy for him. Parents who decided to kick their children out of the house. What was the reason? I was kicked out the day I turned 17. I lived out of my car for 3 months while working fast food and completing my senior year. I would have probably dropped out had it not been for my best friend's dad. He found out about the situation and forced me to move in with him. He wouldn't take no for an answer. He had recently got divorced because his stay-at-home wife was cheating on him. Because they had a spare bedroom and I was friends with both his sons that lived with him, he told me it's just us guys living there and having fun. You stay until you finish school. After that, you can pay $100 a month in rent until you decide what to do. Don't argue with me. The man's a saint. I wouldn't have been able to keep going to school without him, and he knew it. He's a guy who had to drop out to work back in the day to support his family. He got his GED and clawed his way up to head engineer at a factory so he could afford a nice home for his wife and kids. He bought a nice 2-story home that he barely got to stay in for a woman who didn't appreciate him. The man even came home every single day and cooked meals for us to make sure we'd eat. In the middle of fighting a divorce, trying to get custody of both of his kids, and keep the house he paid for, he took me in, adding to the stress. He did that for me just because I was friends with his sons. If I ever get rich, that man is getting an early retirement and a comfortable home wherever he chooses. If that man can do all that for someone that isn't his child, parents have no excuse for not helping their own kids out. My daughter is refusing to talk to me after I found out she has a boyfriend and has been drinking. She ran off with her boyfriend and cut off all contact with us, and I want her to come back and apologize. I have 4 kids with my wife, 3 sons and a daughter. Our sons were born when we were in our late 20s, but our daughter came very late, around when I was 40. I'd like to add that I love all of them equally and would never discriminate. My first son began his own business in another country and the others more or less followed his footsteps. My daughter turned 18 very recently and we were all very excited for her. She is the star child in our family, the one that never disappointed us. She even got a job in high school so she wouldn't have to ask us for money, something that none of our sons did. But the college that she applied for is too far for her to travel from home, so she would have to stay at the college. My wife has partial paralysis and has trouble moving on her own. So with me reaching the old age of 60, we need a lot of help around the house. Our daughter has been happily fulfilling our needs so far. But I'm worried that her choice of college is intentional and she just wants to stop taking care of us. The reason for that is her recent attitude. Last Friday, I asked her to take her mother to a doctor's appointment. She already has her license so this shouldn't have been a problem for her. However, she told me that she had plans and so we should reschedule the appointment. This was the first time anything like this had ever happened. I was reasonably mad at her, and told her you need to cancel your plans young lady, because your mother is your utmost priority. She made a face that said are you kidding me? She started complaining because it was one of her close friends' birthdays, and that it wasn't fair because her plans were made weeks in advance. I told her that it didn't matter, she should know her priorities better. After some more backhand. Fourth, I made her back off and she did what I had asked her to do, which was doing her daughterly duty. After she left, I told myself to calm down and that she is just going through her period. Me and my wife were already out of our prime when she was born, so we had to sacrifice a lot to take care of her. And we had raised our daughter with a goal in mind, that she would take care of us in return when we are older. I was certain that we had instilled good values in her. Things calmed down for a day or two, but then I received some horrific news over the weekend. Our daughter had gone to a party to make up for the birthday she had missed, and she had decided to have a drink with her so-called friends. I was very disappointed in her, as I had made it clear that she wasn't allowed to drink until she was 21. Even my wife couldn't believe her audacity to go directly against our teachings. I confronted her about it in the morning, and her reply was, if it's going to happen in college, might as well do it now. What's the difference anyway? I don't know where she got this attitude from, but I knew I had to shut it down fast. I told her that if drinking is what you're going to college for, then I won't let you go there. You showed me that you aren't ready for the real world by doing this. She looked at me like she had seen a ghost. You can't possibly not let me go to college, that is not happening. She argued that she was already an adult, and could make her own choices. So I told her, you are under this roof, meaning that you are under my rules. To show her that I was serious, I brought her college acceptance letter and tore it in half in front of her eyes. She broke down in tears. Why would you do that? What the hell is wrong with you? But actions have consequences and she has to deal with them. Instead of comforting her, I taunted her by saying, don't tell me you also have a boyfriend now. Maybe that's why you were so eager to drink, because he's been influencing you in a bad way. Then she called me a jerk and admitted that she indeed had a boyfriend. I was flabbergasted. Now I was certain that I had made the correct decision by punishing her. She wasn't listening to her caring and thoughtful parents, and her boyfriend probably only wanted her body. I told her what was on my mind, and she told me I had no idea what I was talking about. By that point, I was tired and was having trouble standing up. So I went to lay on my bed, ignoring whatever she was trying to say. I thought that she would come around, and realized that I was only doing what was best for her. But 1 week later, she disappeared from the house. She ran off with her boyfriend, and it's been 1 month, and I've had absolutely no contact with her. Edit, my wife has had infrequent contact with her. Edit 2, as long as my daughter is safe and sound I'm not going to interfere. It's her life, and if she chooses so, she will have to learn the hard way in life.
What was the worst scandal of your school? College professor got busted by the FBI for owning images of people I cannot say on TikTok, and trying to meet up with a known minor online. The minor was a FBI agent posing as a 16 years old. A student with the school newspaper got wind of it, but the school administration wouldn't let them run it in the school newspaper and said the student wasn't allowed to tell anyone. Anyway, said student totally complied, and by complied I mean they went to the print shop and printed off 500 plus copies of the story on the bust and walked through the dorms, depositing one in front of each dorm door. They included the professor's picture and the extra details that the school administration had tried to shush them up to. It was an interesting breakfast in the cafeteria that morning.
Nurses, what's your most gory and disgusting experience? I was taking call one night, and woke up at 2 in the morning for a general surgery call. Pretty vague, but at the time, I lived in a town that had large populations of young military guys and avid meth users, so late night emergencies were common. Got to the hospital, where a few more details awaited me: pararectal abscess. For the uninitiated, this means that somewhere in the immediate vicinity of the butthole, there was a pocket of pus that needed draining. Needless to say, our entire crew was less than thrilled. I went down to the emergency room to transport the patient, and the only thing the ER nurse said as she handed me the chart was, "Have fun with this one." Amongst healthcare professionals, vague statements like that are a bad sign. My patient was a 314 pounds Native American woman, who barely fit on the stretcher I was transporting her on. She was rolling frantically side to side and moaning in pain, pulling at her clothes and muttering Hail Marys. I could barely get her name out of her after a few minutes of questioning, so after I confirmed her identity and what we were working on, I figured it was best just to get her to the anesthesiologist so we could knock her out and get this circus started. She continued her theatrics the entire 10-minute ride to the OR, nearly falling off the surgical table as we were trying to put her under anesthetic. We see patients like this a lot, though, chronic drug abusers who don't handle pain well and who have used so many drugs that even increased levels of pain medication don't touch simply because of high tolerance levels. It should be noted, tonight's surgical team was not exactly wet behind the ears. I've been working in healthcare for several years already, mostly in psych and medical settings. I've watched an 88-year-old man tear a 1-inch diameter catheter balloon out of his penis while screaming, "You'll never make me talk." I've been attacked by an HIV-positive neo-Nazi. I've seen some shit. The other nurse had been in the OR as a trauma specialist for over 10 years. The anesthesiologist had done residency at a level 1 trauma center, or as we call them, knife and gun clubs. The surgeon was ex-army, and averaged about 8 words and 2 facial expressions a week. None of us expected what was about to happen next. We got the lady off to sleep, put her into the stirrups, and I began washing off the rectal area. It was red and inflamed, a little bit of pus was seeping through, but it was all pretty standard. Her chart had noted that she'd been injecting 4 drugs through her perineum, so this was obviously an infection from dirty needles or bad drugs, but overall, it didn't seem to warrant her repeated cries of "Oh Jesus, kill me now." The surgeon steps up with a scalpel, sinks just the tip in, and at the exact same moment, the patient had a muscle twitch in her diaphragm, and just like that, all hell broke loose. Unbeknownst to us, the infection had actually tunneled nearly a foot into her abdomen, creating a vast cavern full of pus, rotten tissue, and fecal matter that had seeped outside of her colon. This godforsaken mixture came rocketing out of that little incision like we were recreating the funeral scene from Jane Austen's Mafia. We all wear waterproof gowns, face masks, gloves, hats, the works, all of which were as helpful as rain boots against a fire hose. The bed was in the middle of the room, an easy 7 feet from the nearest wall, but by the time we were done, I was still finding bits of rotten flesh pasted against the back wall. As the surgeon continued to advance his blade, the torrent just continued. The patient kept seizing against the ventilator, which is not uncommon in surgery, and with every muscle contraction, she shot more of this brackish gray-brown fluid out onto the floor until, within minutes, it was seeping into the other nurse's shoes. I was nearly 12 feet away, jaw dropped open within my surgical mask, watching the second nurse dry heaving and the surgeon standing on tiptoes to keep this stuff from soaking his socks any further. The smell hit them first. Oh God, I just threw up in my mask. The other nurse was out, she tore off her mask and sprinted out of the room, shoulders still heaving. Then it hit me, mouth still wide open, not able to believe the volume of fluid this woman's body contained. It was like getting a great big bite of the despair and apathy that permeated this woman's life. I couldn't ducking breath, my lungs simply refused to pull any more of that stuff in. The anesthesiologist went down next, an ex-NCAA-D1 tailback, his 6'2" frame shaking as he threw open the door to the OR suite in an attempt to get more air in, letting me glimpse the second nurse still throwing up in the sinks outside the door. Another geyser of pus splashed across the front of the surgeon. The YouTube clip of David at the dentist keeps playing in my head. Is this real life? In all operating rooms, everywhere in the world, regardless of socialized or privatized, secular or religious, big or small, there is one thing the same. Somewhere, there is a bottle of peppermint concentrate. Everyone in the department knows where it is, everyone knows what it is for, and everyone prays to their gods they never have to use it. In times like this, we rub it on the inside of our masks to keep the outside smells at bay long enough to finish the procedure and shower off. I sprinted to the OR Central Supply, ripping open the drawer where this vial of ambrosia was kept, and was greeted by an empty ducking box. The bottle had been emptied and not replaced. Somewhere out there was a godless bastard who had used the last of the peppermint oil, and not replaced a single ducking drop of it. To this day, if I figure out who it was, I'll kill them with my bare hands, but not before cramming their head up the colon of every last meth user I can find, just so we're even. I darted back into the room with the next best thing I can find, a vial of Mastisol, which is an adhesive rub we use sometimes for bandaging. It's not as good as peppermint, but considering that over 1/3 of the floor was now thoroughly coated in what could easily be mistaken for a combination of bovine afterbirth and maple syrup, we were out of options. I started rubbing as much of the Mastisol as I could get on the inside of my mask, just glad to be smelling anything except whatever slimy demon spawn we just cut out of this woman. The anesthesiologist grabbed the vial next, dousing the front of his mask in it so he could stand next to his machines long enough to make sure this woman didn't die on the table. It wasn't until later that we realized that Mastisol can give you a mild high from huffing it like this, but in retrospect, that's probably what got us through. By this time, the smell had permeated out of our OR suite, and down the 40-foot hallway to the front desk, where the other nurse still sat, eyes bloodshot and watery, clenching her stomach desperately. Our suite looked like the underground river of ooze from Ghostbusters 2, except dirty. Oh so dirty. I stepped back into the OR suite, not wanting to leave the surgeon by himself in case he genuinely needed help. It was like one of those overly artistic representations of a zombie apocalypse you see on fan forums. Here's this one guy, in blue surgical garb, standing nearly ankle deep in lumps of dead tissue, fecal matter, and several liters of syrupy infection. He was performing surgery in the swamps of Dagoba, except the swamps had just come out of this woman's butt and there was no Yoda. He and I didn't say a word for the next 10 minutes as he scraped the inside of the abscess until all the dead tissue was out, the front of his gown a gruesome mixture of brown and red, his eyes squinted against the stinging vapors originating directly in front of him. I finished my required paperwork as quickly as I could, helped him stuff the recently vacated opening full of gauze, taped this woman's buttocks closed to hold the dressing for as long as possible, woke her up, and immediately shipped off to the recovery ward. Until then, I'd only heard of alcohol showers. Turns out 70% isopropyl alcohol is about the only thing that can even touch a scent like that once it's soaked into your skin. It takes 4 or 5 bottles to get really clean, but it's worth it. It's probably the only scenario I can honestly endorse drinking a little of it, too. As we left the locker room, the surgeon and I looked at each other, and he said the only negative sentence I heard him utter in 2.5 years of working together: that was bad. The next morning the entire department and whole floor still smelled. The housekeepers told me later that it took them nearly an hour to suction up all of the fluid and debris left behind. The OR suite itself was closed off and quarantined for 2 more days just to let the smell finally clear out. I laugh now when I hear new recruits to healthcare talk about the worst thing they've seen. You ain't seen shit, kid. I just blocked my own wife on Facebook. I never really got a good education, and I've always been a $40,000 a year guy, which is $20 an hour. My wife and I have been married for 20 years and have a 9-year-old daughter. In 2017, I landed a much better job that paid $70,000 to do oil industry shit that I'll never understand. But hey, it pays well. This job really boosted our living quality. My wife was able to work part-time during that. And in 2019, we bought a house. In 2020 the pandemic came, and I lost my job. Jobs were hard to find during that period of time, so I collected unemployment for a month, then went to work in a warehouse for $15 an hour. She got a job at the same warehouse for the same amount of money. Sweet. Both of us combined to make what I used to make alone. But that's not too bad, we'll be fine. We were determined to keep our house. After only a week, she decides she can't handle working 40 hours a week, so she quits. And then after realizing I cannot make enough to sustain the family, she makes this post on Facebook, talking down on me for not doing enough for my family after she quits the job. I wanted to reply, but didn't want to be that guy on Facebook, so I blocked her. I've had her complaining at me every day after I come home, and even her parents had called me to berate me. I'm thinking of just walking away. I feel like she's totally in the wrong for being too lazy to work a 40-hour week, or even working part-time, like she used to do. Some might say, stay-at-home mom is a hard job too. You need to appreciate her for it. Normally, I would agree, and I respect all stay-at-home parents. But she doesn't do shit. She's usually stoned and drunk and doesn't even know where our 9-year-old daughter is. The house is also trashed when I get home. I won't ask her where our daughter is, and she always responds with, she's at the neighbor's kid's house. Which is wrong, my daughter is usually at her best friend's house one street over. My wife doesn't even know my daughter's best friend's name. It's not fair for me or my daughter. I just want to leave this bitch but don't know how. My brother planned on proposing at my wedding, so I threatened to revoke his invitation plus update. I, 25M, am getting married in December. My fiancé, 24F, and I both are very excited and busy planning, and this incident is making things much more stressful. A couple weeks ago I was talking about the wedding with my brother, 30M, and he asked if it'd be okay for him to propose to his girlfriend at our wedding. I laughed and said yeah, sure, if you want to get your SS handed to you by my fiancé. He laughed, and I figured he got the message. The other day my fiancé came to me, in tears, saying that my brother had called her and thanked her for letting him propose at the wedding. She told him that it never happened, and he wasn't allowed to do that, and he just laughed and thanked her again. I called my brother back and asked him what was going on. He's insisting that he's going to propose to his girlfriend at the wedding. He claims it's getting even for when I announced our engagement at the same family dinner he brought his girlfriend to meet the family. I had no idea, they arrived separately and she got there after I had made the announcement. I told him if he doesn't get it through his head that he is absolutely not allowed to propose, both him and his girlfriend won't be allowed into the wedding at all, and if he tries to pull a stunt, he'll be kicked out immediately. He didn't take it well and told the whole family. My fiancé and I have been getting calls and messages from them telling us how crappy we are for doing that. How dare I turn my back on my brother? He's also now blaming me for spoiling the proposal to his girlfriend and the family, because if I hadn't been such an SS, he wouldn't have had to break the news to the family like this. I still stand by what I did. I don't think I was out of line at all, but my fiancé thinks we should have just let him propose to avoid conflict. I know it means a lot to her that everyone gets along in that. There's no hard feelings, especially since she's feeling stressed as is, but I don't want to give in to my brother. Update. As expected, once the family heard our side of the story and put everything together, many of them changed their tune. Most of the family members who had been calling me an a-hole ended up apologizing and siding with me and my fiancé. My brother was livid. He called me about an hour after the post went up and demanded that I take it down because it made him look bad. He said he was being unfairly attacked, and even blamed me for his girlfriend breaking up with him. My brother has formally been banned from the entire wedding, and we've asked any family members who continue to side with him to RSVP that they will not be attending. Our parents aren't happy with the turnout, and my mother has decided she won't be attending my wedding because of how I'm alienating my brother during an important event. I don't mind, I've never been very close with her, and while it is a bit sad that she's choosing my hard-headed brother over my wedding, I still have my father's full support. My brother's, now ex-girlfriend is still invited and got promoted to bridesmaid because of how helpful and supportive she's been to my fiancé. Hopefully this is the last issue we'll run into during wedding planning. Would you support a mandatory retirement or term limits for U.S. House, U.S. Senate and U.S. Supreme Court justices, and if not, why? Fuck yeah, I'd support term limits for those old FCKS in the House, Senate, and Supreme Court. I mean, seriously, why do these people get to hold on to their jobs for decades, getting all stale and corrupt and out of touch with real people? I've seen the effects of this firsthand. My dad owned a small business, and he had to deal with the same SHT old senators and congresspeople for years. They were always talking a big game about supporting small businesses and helping the working class, but when it came down to it, they were just looking out for their own interests and the interests of their rich donors. And don't even get me started on the Supreme Court. These people are appointed for life, and they get to make decisions that affect all of us for decades. What if they're completely out of touch with modern values and issues? What if they're just using their power to uphold outdated laws and oppress marginalized groups? I've seen how this system can be used to destroy people's lives. My best friend's mom was an immigrant who came here when she was a kid. She had to fight tooth and nail to build a successful business and provide for her family. But then the Supreme Court passed all these anti-immigrant laws that made it harder for her to work and stay in the country. She had to sell her business and move her family back to the country she fled from. It was heartbreaking to see her go through this. It's time for a change. We need to demand term limits and retirement ages for these powerful government positions. We need fresh ideas and perspectives if we're going to make progress and move towards a more just and equitable society. Anything less is just maintaining the status quo and letting the rich and powerful maintain their grip over us. It's time to take a stand and fight for our rights and our futures. We can't let these old farts keep making decisions that will affect generations to come. We need to speak up and make our voices heard. We need to demand change now. What is the most surprising thing you have accidentally overheard about yourself? My parents divorced when I was 4. My mother remarried a man 1 year later in 1965. He was a very controlling man about most things, but that's a different story. In the summer between my 4th and 5th grade, he became born again at a Billy Graham revival. At his insistence, my mother soon followed, as did my sister. I was the only one in our family of 4 who didn't want to give up their entire life and become a singularly focused religious fanatic. My stepfather had never really liked me before that. After that, he hated me, and could barely contain his loathsome attitude toward me. Speeding ahead a few years, when I was entering the 12th grade, my mother took me aside one day and told me that they had no money to help me with college, that I was going to have to figure out my future on my own. She was quite literal about that. They never even once discussed with me what my options might be. I said it was okay. I'd figure it out. I did, and after high school, I got a job at a factory. My sister, who is 4 years older than me, did attend a religious college, and while it crossed my mind as to how she was able to pay for college, I never asked. We weren't very close. Fast forward to 1994. I am now successful in my career. I have a large house with a swimming pool and hot tub in the backyard. My family, mother, stepfather, sister and her family, are invited to my house for an afternoon barbecue. My mother and sister are sitting in my hot tub. I am around the corner of the house tending the barbecue. They don't realize that I'm there. They are talking loudly, and I can clearly hear them. My sister starts talking about college education for her kids, and she asks my mom how she and my stepfather saved up the money for her college education. My mom immediately started to panic, and began shushing my sister to be quiet. She frantically said, "I don't want Kent to hear this." We told him we had no money for college. I always knew that I was the black sheep in the family, but it was in that moment that I truly realized how much I was excluded. From that point on, my eyes and mind were open to the lies and deception within my family. It forever altered our relationship. Update stepfather D. Ed. Felt nothing. My wife thinks that I suffer from PTSD because of him. Maybe with time I can now forget and maybe even forgive. I wonder if he got the gold-plated throne next to God that he obsessed on his entire life. I doubt it. Am I wrong for suggesting my wife get a tummy tuck? I don't know if I messed up with my wife or not. Me and my wife are both in our late 30s, and back when we were in our 20s, we had 3 awesome kids. But lately, my wife's been all about this mom pooch she says she's got. She's lost a bunch of weight since our kids came along, but she's still feeling kinda weird about her tummy. It's like she's got this extra skin and stuff that's just hanging around and making her unhappy. She's been talking about it so much, I'll admit, it started getting on my nerves. She's even been checking out stuff online, like different surgeries to help with that. I saw her searching about tummy tucks and liposuction and all that stuff. Honestly, I thought I was being a good guy when I told her I'd pay for it if she wanted to go for one of these procedures. But then, she got really mad. She said something like, "Of course you're gonna pay, it's not like your body went through all these changes." I didn't mean to upset her, I just thought I was being supportive. I even had to say sorry for suggesting it. But she went ahead and made an appointment for a consultation anyway. I guess she's taking it seriously, even if she got mad at me for offering. So, now I'm kinda stuck. Was it wrong of me to suggest it? Should I have just kept my mouth shut and let her figure things out on her own? After all, it's her body and her decision.
Day I messed up by getting shower head. I, 31F, was having a shower and my husband, 34M, decided to join. Although it's normal for us to shower together, we have to share a standing shower with minimal space so it can get pretty cramped. Things started getting a little steamy, and not just because the hot water. I decided to kneel down and give him head. I'll spare the details because I'm definitely not an erotic writer, sorry. We finished and he reached around me for a hug with a smile on his face, and then whispered, "I'm going to pass out in my ear." In the seconds before the next series of events, my first thought was that he was joking. Then his head hit my shoulder and I was left with a 6 feet 3 inches man's full weight in my arms. The shower is wet, everything is slippery, and the next thing I know is the weight of both of our bodies crashing into the shower door, which opened, and out spilled my naked body. I look over, my hand is still supporting my husband's head whose body is slumped inside the too tiny shower. His eyes flutter open, realizing that he is on the floor of the shower and his wife is laying halfway outside of it. We both immediately get to each other and repeatedly ask, "Are you okay?" "I'm okay, are you okay?" Thankfully, neither one of us were really hurt. My husband bit his lip and I have a giant purple bruise across my butt cheek where I landed. He said he remembers having a long dream, even though he was only out for a few seconds. He compares it to when you're about to die and you see your life flash before your eyes.
You literally almost sucked the life out of him.
I refused to help my stepdaughter with her baby and now she is threatening me. I married my husband Sam 5 years ago. Sam always knew I did not want to have children of my own. He was fine with it. He has a daughter Leah, F25. His wife died when Leah was 10 years old and I met him when she was 15. I didn't meet her till after a year of dating. She was a sweet young adult and we got along great. I did not move in with Sam till Leah left for college though. Leah got pregnant last year. Her boyfriend did not want to keep the baby but she wanted to keep it. He broke up with her. Leah moved back in with us cause she could not afford her lifestyle without him. She worked as a teacher and he was the breadwinner. I had concerns about how she was going to raise a child on a teacher's salary by herself. I suggested getting him to pay child support. She did not want that. Sam thought I should stay out of it. Fine. But once she had the baby around 4 months back, Leah seemed to realize having a baby is not the sunshine and rainbows she thought it was. She barely got any sleep during the last 4 months. All the while Sam was helping her with the baby while I did almost all chores myself. Now her leave is ending. She did not want to leave baby at daycare or with a nanny. Sam and I both work as well. She asked if I could stay home with the baby. I said no. First, it is not my baby, and I never wanted to raise a child. Second, I have work. She asked Sam who asked me to do it instead. I refused stating the reasons again. Sam couldn't stay home because he earned more than me and covered more bills. I asked why Leah can't stay home with the baby herself. She said how she was young and had to build a career. I said many people take breaks to raise kids, and she broke down crying about how she was so tired all the time being a mom and she needed something else in her life too. Sam feels bad for her and thinks we should help her. I suggested she pay for nanny with her income, but Leah doesn't want strangers looking after her baby. Both of them are pressuring me to stay home with baby so she can go to work. I am standing firm on my decision. Leah said yesterday how she wished her mom was alive since she would have had her back. She said I didn't love her and my husband is also mad at me. I refused to help my stepdaughter with her baby and now she is threatening me. I realize the fact is he sees his daughter as his baby girl and me as the adult in this situation. So he needs me to act like an adult and support the child. I tried to make him realize she is not a child, she made her own decisions and she needs to be an adult. He says I won't get how a parent would feel and he needs to be there for her. I realized his long-term plan is to keep supporting her as long as he can and she wants it. To be frank, I sort of respect his stand. A father wanting to be there for his daughter and wanting to live for her is admirable. But that is not the life I envisioned. Loving grandmother that babysit occasionally? Sure. But raising Leah and her baby? Nope. Before we decided on anything extreme we had a talk with Leah as well. To know what her plans are. We revisited the topic of child support and this time her dad was adamant to know why. Your replies made him concerned, I think. Well, apparently the reason is Leah is still in love with him. She is scared pushing a court case and responsibility on him, on a decision she made will scare him away. She is still holding on to hope he will come back. We don't think she is being realistic. But have decided to table that talk for later since Sam is anyway ready to fund the baby's life. And child support can be demanded with back pay when she decides to follow up. We offered her multiple solutions. Such as lesser work hours, career change, nanny, daycare. She did not accept any offer. She loves the school she works at and does not want to leave it. She claims reducing hours will impact her career trajectory and since she wants to work, she might as well work full-time. She does not want to leave baby with strangers, nanny/daycare, and is refusing to hear it. She wants her baby to grow up with family feeling loved and she can't be at peace unless she knows one of us is with the baby. Sam is refusing to cut down hours himself since he can't afford bills himself. Let me clarify. He had refinanced this house to pay for her college education, did not want her to have any loans. I had suggested we downsize from this 3-bedroom house to a 1-bedroom one, we can both afford. He wanted to have space for his daughter. I understood that, but I couldn't afford to pay for it. We came to understanding I wouldn't pay for it and won't have any rights to the house either. That is his biggest payment. We split rest of expense proportionate to our income till Leah moved back in. She doesn't help financially. I contributed to normal day-to-day expenses but all baby-related expenses are being met by Sam. If Sam stops working or reduce hours, he won't be able to do all these. I would take up being breadwinner but we would have to downsize and Leah would at least have to cover all baby-related expenses herself. Neither of them wants that. The conclusion of all discussions were the same. They needed me to stay home with baby. Sam wouldn't be putting anything to my savings or retirement funds cause he won't have funds for that. He also thinks it isn't necessary since I can just go back to work when baby starts school. Long story short, I left. Packed all my clothes and stuff, out everything I have heard in my car and is now crashing at a friend's home. I don't have any rights to the house or own any furniture there so leaving was easy. I have booked an appointment with my lawyer. I think this is the best decision I can take for myself. I'm getting married in 2 weeks and I am totally screwed. My fiancée Sarah, 28 female, and me, 34 male, have known each other for about 6 years, engaged for 1. Our wedding is scheduled to take place in just 2 weeks and I just witnessed something that is making me feel like I am making the biggest mistake in my life. Tonight Sarah and I were taking a rare opportunity to relax at home. Sarah was in the kitchen making dinner while I was out back working on one of my projects. We live on acreage and I am building a pagoda/fire pit in the backyard that we were planning on using this fall. Anyway, as you do when you're doing heavy labor I get thirsty and come back to the house to get a drink, where I see Sarah at the counter preparing dinner and talking on speakerphone. I recognize the voice instantly as my brother-in-law Marty. Now, this is where my brain gets totally twisted. Marty asks Sarah where her sister Evelyn is as he's been trying to get in contact with her and she's not answering texts, and I hear Sarah say to him, "She just left here, she should be home in a half hour or so." It should be noted that Evelyn is Marty's wife of 5 years. I have to admit that I didn't immediately register what she had just said, because I went into the kitchen and grabbed a glass and asked Sarah what was that all about? And she responds with Marty was looking for Evie. I see her texting and I ask her what are you doing? And she says I'm texting Evie that Marty was looking for her. Anyway, I pour myself a drink, sit down, have a sip and then finally my brain starts to work. First off, I heard Sarah tell Marty that Evelyn was here. Evelyn was not here and the last time we saw her was yesterday when she came over to work on some last-minute wedding decoration stuff with Sarah. Secondly, why is she texting Evelyn and expecting a response when I distinctly heard Marty that Evelyn wasn't answering her texts? Lastly, why the hell would she tell Marty that Evelyn should be back in 30 minutes unless she either knows where she is, then why did she lie? Or she is, right now in front of me, texting her to tell her to get her butt home quickly. The only conclusion that I came up with is that Sarah is lying to Marty about the whereabouts of her sister, Marty's wife, and is probably warning Evie that Marty will expect her home in half an hour. I then spent probably the next 5 hours concocting various explanations for this behavior, some decent, some downright horrible, and playing them back in my head. I wanted, really badly to ask Sarah about this, but at the same time if what I think is going on, Then I doubted I'd get a straight answer. Which brings me to about an hour ago. I woke up around 1 a.m. to use the toilet and I couldn't resist the urge to check Sarah's phone. We both know each other's pins, so this wasn't a difficult thing to do. Anyway, I grabbed the phone, retreated to the bathroom and unlocked it, and yup, it was exactly what I was afraid of and probably what most of you were expecting. Sarah's sister Evelyn has been having an affair for about 6 months with a coworker, and Sarah has been helping Evelyn cover it up for almost that entire time. There are literally hundreds of texts between them discussing it, discussing the coworker, discussing intimate stuff, really embarrassing things about my brother-in-law, and probably uncharitable, just stuff that makes my stomach churn, and here is my soon-to-be wife going along with all of it without batting an eye. I took some screenshots of the entire thread, put the phone back where I found it, and then retreated to my home office to find myself here typing it all out on Reddit simply so I can avoid the primal scream that wants to come out of my mouth right now. I am totally 100% screwed. Reddit, I cannot marry Sarah, I just cannot do it. I can't think of any reasonable excuse she could offer me about assisting her sister in this affair and victimizing not only Marty, but their 2-year-old daughter as well. On the other hand, myself, my family, Sarah and her family, have all sunk an enormous amount of money into a wedding that is supposed to happen in around 2 weeks. There is no way we are getting any of that money back. On top of that, I feel like an absolute fool. Like, how did I not know this woman was like this? And what the hell am I going to do? I can't marry her, I absolutely cannot. However, I still want to. She's beautiful and fun and kind, and I thought we had a bright future ahead of us. She's never done anything wrong to me, but I just can't see her the same now. It's like a big black stain on an otherwise beautiful picture. I just don't know how in the world I got this so wrong, and I'm absolutely dreading doing what I know I need to do. I feel like I want to vomit or break something.
Overthinkers of Reddit, what unlikely scenario actually came true that you were completely prepared for because you were an overthinker? When my wife and I were getting married and looking for a place for ceremony, we have found this beautiful but quite remote garden. We were signing the contract for the event and I kept thinking that it was quite remote, so I asked, how much time does it take for the ambulance to get here? I became the laughingstock of both families. My, then future, mother-in-law, who was present at the meeting, literally fell down from the chair laughing. The wedding organizer remembered it for weeks, telling about it everyone we met. My dad ended every sentence with, "But maybe you need an ambulance for that." My wife was making siren noises when I was saying something we disagreed on. Every family dinner, all the aunts and uncles were checking if the ambulance was present. You name it. The entire package. Still, I couldn't get rid of this weird feeling. It would have taken over an hour for the ambulance to get to the garden. After a few weeks I ended up paying a private ambulance to be present at the wedding. Fast forward to the ceremony. As my wife literally walks down the aisle, at the back of the garden I see 2 paramedics running with a stretcher and my dad squeezing my hand whispering, "That's not of your goddamn business, let them to take care of it." What happened was that one of our older guests got a heart attack and almost died at ceremony, was saved by the private ambulance. Ever since then, when my wife tells me that I'm overthinking, I just do the siren noise.
What did someone say to you that instantly made you realize their life was in danger? When I was 20 years old, I won a trip to Acapulco for 2 weeks. My cousin, also 20, and I traveled the day after Christmas. The first week had already passed when her little brother, 17 years old, unexpectedly surprised us by showing up saying he was able to get a cheap airline ticket and wanted to spend the last week we were there with us. Our first week in Acapulco, my cousin and I had been partying, living it up. Most often not returning to our condo until around dawn. So by week 2 we were a lot more chill and wanted to go to sleep much earlier. But my younger cousin had just arrived, spread his wings and was ready to go. That night we went out to dinner with him, showed him around a bit, and then later when the disco opened up around midnight we went with him. About 2 a.m. we decided we were tired and wanted to go back to our condo. We told him, "Listen, we are really tired and want to go back and go to sleep. We don't want to be your mother here, but we want you to promise us that you will take a taxi back to the condo the whole way, no exceptions." He promised and we returned to our room. Later that night while we were sleeping the phone rang and I answered it. It was the night doorman/front desk man who was on duty checking to make sure you were a guest at the condo before he buzzed the guests in through the gate that surrounded the property. In broken English, he said, "Please come, your brother needs help." I imagined he probably had gotten intoxicated and maybe the elevator wasn't working. This frequently happened. I told his sister, "I will go down and help him up." I went down and lay on the concrete by the pool, in front of the door that opened through the gate to the condo. I saw my cousin. Upon seeing him I was a little mad, suspecting he might be playing a practical joke on me, and I was not amused. I walked over to him and said, "Jay, what is going on?" He replied, "I think I have been stabbed." It was clear seeing his face he was not well. Then he tried but failed to get up because he needed to go to the bathroom. I told him, "Don't move." He yelled, "I have to. I need to poop badly." I replied, "I don't care. Do not move if you have to. Go in your pants, just don't move." It was then he weakly began whispering to me, "Shonda, I want you to know how much I love you. I need you to tell my sister how much I love her. Growing up with you guys and our memories together mean everything to me." Tears glistened in his eyes. At that moment I knew his life was in extreme jeopardy. Turns out my cousin had taken a taxi, but he had also seen that his sister and I always negotiated our price before we got in and would not go above certain amounts for a taxi. The driver agreed to a certain amount and my cousin got in and was heading back to the condo. Our condo was a block off the main drag on a side street with lots of big trees. When the driver got to the point where a street began, he told my cousin it would cost more. My cousin said, "No way, you agreed to a certain price." But the driver retorted to bad, "Money or get out." My cousin, inebriated, got out and walked the rest of the way. He was at the door in front of the gate of our condo when he heard someone from behind him asking a question he thought He turned and the guy lunged for my cousin's Velcro watch, not even a nice one. The robber also had an ice pick in his hand. The robber began struggling with my cousin who was yelling. All of this, thankfully, was taking place in front of the door in the gate to our condo. The condo employee who was on duty saw what was happening in a mirror over the gate. He used to see who was coming and going and who too led into the condo. The doorman went to help my cousin as he opened the door. The robber thrust the ice pick into my cousin's chest. The doorman began dragging my cousin inside and pushing the attacker off as the attacker tried again to stab with the ice pick whomever he could. After assessing my cousin was most likely stabbed, I went to ask the doorman, who was about 15 feet away from me in a glass-walled office, who he was calling. As he was on the phone, he told the police. I said, "Forget the police, call an ambulance." A doctor arrived in an old VW bug. He came in and checked my cousin's pulse, immediately asserting, "We have to go right now, there is no time to lose." I was only wearing a short Victoria's Secret nightgown, thankfully a pretty modest one, and didn't even have shoes on. I said I need to get clothes on and the doctor replied, "He doesn't have time for you to get clothes on, must go right now." My cousin's sister had come down by now. She also was without shoes and in a short Victoria's Secret nightgown. We piled into the doctor's VW and he raced at top speed like a bat out of hell to the hospital. On the way, he told us that my cousin's pulse was weak and thready, he had to have medical attention immediately. By then we also had seen the small puncture wound to his chest. Arriving at the hospital, the doctor quickly carried my cousin inside and left us to find our way to the waiting room. We were there for a while and some Canadian girls came in. They had brought their friend in because they thought someone had drugged her drink. We began talking with them, sharing our experience too. After a while longer, a man walked in that we had never seen before and he walked right over to where we were with the Canadian girls and asked, "What's going on?" He asked us in such a familiar way that we thought he must know the Canadian girls, and so we told him what was going on and they did too. He then just walked away deeper into the hospital. It was then we realized none of us knew who this man was. The Canadian girls had also mistakenly thought we knew him by the way he acted. After what seemed like a long time, he came back and reported to us he had checked in on my cousin and spoke to the doctors, announcing, "It looks like you are going to be here a while. I will go and get you food, what would you like?" Then he left. He later returned with food and drinks and one of the Canadian girls asked him to get her cigarettes, so he left again. While he was gone the second time, the doctors came and got my cousin and me. They took us into a room, showed us chest x-rays and told us that my cousin had indeed been stabbed in the chest, but that we were fortunate because while it had punctured the sac around his heart, it hadn't actually punctured his heart. They said what they had to do was insert a needle into his chest area and drain off the blood that was pooling and forming a clot there. We returned to the waiting room and less than 15 minutes later they called us back again. This time they divulged that they had been wrong. Not only had the sac around his heart been punctured, his heart indeed also been punctured and they must do emergency open heart surgery immediately. The doctors were worried about doing it though because he was 17 years old and his parents were not there, but articulated the surgery was urgently needed so they were going to go ahead anyway. However, they informed us this is a private hospital and we cannot start until you have paid for this surgery ahead of time. We were astonished thinking, what? How can we do that? Then asking, will you take his medical insurance? They told us that his USA insurance wouldn't work there in Mexico. I just found out that my father baby trapped my mother with me. I grew up thinking my mother had abandoned us. That is what he always told me. He told me my mother packed up and left us when I turned 2 years old. I grew up to resent and hate her, mainly because I saw how my father was working super long hours to make ends meet. I hated how my grandma basically had to raise me. When I would ask her about my mother, my grandma painted a picture of a bitter, spiteful, hateful, spoiled and entitled woman. I felt very justified in my anger and hate for her. That's what my family told me and I had absolutely no reason to doubt them. A few weeks ago I found her on social media while at my boyfriend's house, and I was so mad. She was out there living her best life. She is a cook in a Michelin star restaurant. She travels, has a huge apartment, and apparently is married to a gorgeous man. In a fit of rage, I DM'd her cruising her out for abandoning me to live her frivolous life and that karma would come to her. She obviously saw it. Instead of going off on me, she just asked me to meet her and that she felt like I had a right to express my anger to her in person and that she owed me as much. I was starstruck because my father said she never stood for the consequences of her actions. Without telling anyone I agreed. She invited me to this amazing restaurant. She paid an Uber for me and everything. It was very awkward at the beginning. I kept berating her. I was so angry. I cried a little. She just sat there and took it all in. I then asked her why she abandoned me. She then asked, "Do you really want to know the whole story? It is not nice and you will not like it. I am ready to be the bad guy in your head forever and keep my distance." I just kept pressing her. And then she told me the real story. She told me that my father and she met shortly before ending uni. At that time my mother had said she did not want to stay in uni town. A few months after dating, my father told her that his landlord was evicting him because the apartment was needed for immediate family use. She offered him to stay while he found something else. Months passed and he was not doing anything. Then she got a job offer in another country. She told my father that he could take over her apartment or come with her. They had this huge fight where my mother told him that she was not ready for the type of commitment he wanted. She wanted different things in life than him and that as much as she loved him, that they weren't compatible. They stayed living together and then one day she found out she was pregnant. She told me honestly that she was thinking of not having me. She did not feel ready to be a mom at 22. She did not feel maternal feelings. She said she was already struggling with depression and late diagnosed ADHD. My father convinced her to have me. He said he would take me because he had a right to me, that he would go after her because that baby was also his. So she had me. She said that the time after birth was really bad. My father was dragging out the legal procedures. He refused to vacate the home. My mother said that while she felt love for me and that there were moments when she felt overjoyed, it was overshadowed by huge waves of self-deletion ideation. She was scared that she was gonna hurt me. She also showed me some of the court documents of that time that backed up her claims. In the end, she was so desperate that she agreed to stay with my father if he agreed to be the main caretaker. He did, but only half tried. My mother then told me that it got so bad that she tried to take her life around my second birthday after a particularly nasty fight where my father admitted to having tampered with her birth control. She showed me the papers of the involuntary 72 hours commitment and the legal documents where she was found unfit to be a parent afterward. I felt nauseous after all that. I would have not believed her, hadn't she brought so much evidence with her. She then asked me what I meant in my message that we were struggling. I told her that we were not exactly rich and that I was struggling to come up with the money to go to university in another city. She was bewildered and asked me what my father had been doing with the monthly payments she was making. I told her that we don't receive that money. Then she took out another stack of papers. She is sending child support every month. It is almost $3,000 every month. My son unknowingly saved me from ending my life last night. I was about to do it. And it would have been the biggest mistake. My wife died a few months ago. Thinking that this was going to be my first holiday without her. Well, I got drunk. Really drunk. And all I'm thinking about is I want to go with her. I couldn't stop crying. And I was going to do it. My son called me. He just finished decorating his apartment and he wanted to say hi. It made me smile. He had no idea what I was in the middle of and just casually talking to me about having to sweep up the floor after he dropped and broke a glass ornament. I was so desperate not to get off the phone with him. Asked him to tell me about his day. Meanwhile, I'm there trying not to let him hear me cry. We talked for over an hour. Then he invited me to come spend Christmas Eve with him. When I got off the phone, I effing lost it. I couldn't do it anymore. Right now that I'm more sober and hungover, it hit me how big of a mistake I almost committed. I was about to leave my son without another parent. He just lost his mom and I was about to take away his dad too. He's 19 and out building his own life. But still I couldn't believe I was about to leave him alone in this world. He saved my life.
I expressed affection and got dumped. I, 24 female, finally gathered up the courage to tell the person, 25 male, I've been dating these past months that I'd like him to be my boyfriend last night. Now at that point we were already exclusive and sexually active. I met his friends a few times and I met his parents last weekend. I somewhat considered him my boyfriend already. I believed by asking I'd only make it official, but no, he called me this morning and told me he's not interested in a romantic relationship. I've been really straightforward about wanting a serious relationship and a life partner. I believed he wouldn't seek anything further with me unless he was also looking for the same thing. I feel cheated. Just needed to get it out. Reddit, I'm a clown, but at least there's a whole ocean of clowns here to feel pathetic with.
People who work for the super wealthy. What stuff have you seen? I did a male nanny, job for a rich couple who wanted someone to care for their kids. The wife didn't want a female nanny and I was in college so it helped pay the bills. One day they asked, do you want to go to Hawaii? Turns out the company that the husband was the COO of was doing an executive retreat in Hawaii. Instead of finding daycare in Hawaii for their kids, they thought it'd be easier to just pay for me to fly to Hawaii, care for the kids during the day, and then have my evenings or their family time free. So I went to Hawaii on their dime, had my own hotel room, they paid me for my time and gave me a large stipend for my own food and entertainment. I ended up with pretty much every evening off so I got to spend it. During the day I brought their kids to the beach, we went hiking, and did some touristy running around. On top of that they gave me $5,000 in spending money in case any of the kids wanted anything. I had to show receipts, but when I tried to turn in the receipts the wife just said, oh, don't worry about it. It's only a couple grand, and never verified how I'd spent some of that money. I couldn't tell if she just trusted me implicitly by that point or if she truly thought the amount was so small it didn't matter. They were a really nice family, just very well off, which made just spending money on any problems the easiest answer. I actually got invited to the oldest daughter's high school graduation because she considered me a friend. Would I be the jerk if I go on a vacation with my mom instead of attending my father's wedding? My 26 parents, 44 and 45, have been high school sweethearts. My mom got pregnant straight out of high school. My mom has always supported my dad through everything. She worked double shifts so that my dad can start a business and earn significant amount of money. She never splurged on luxury goods, and even after my dad started his successful business, my mom saved and encouraged him to invest more in his business. And how my lovely dad decides to thank her. He F's a woman who is only a year older than I am. They have been divorced for 3 years and my dad publicly started dating his mistress without any shame. My siblings have a sort of strained relationship with him. I never talked to him after the divorce. I hate to acknowledge his existence and hate it even more that he seems to think he did nothing wrong. He is getting married to his mistress in 10 days. I can tell mom is still hurt by the divorce. She told she is going to Romania, where her parents was born. She always insisted my dad to take her there, but since my dad was busy cheating on her, he took her. I also wanted to go with her because I need an excuse to avoid the wedding altogether. My siblings told me if I don't attend the wedding, they wouldn't as well. My dad has been on my neck and try and guilt trip me into attending his wedding, but I already booked the tickets to Romania. My relative are saying if I don't go I will be disrespecting my dad. I don't think he deserves an ounce of respect from me. Plus I am pretty sure their marriage wouldn't last more than 2 years considering how much she spends just to show off. I'd rather be with my mom. Thank you people. I see that most people think that I am not doing anything wrong. I am packing my bags for Romania. I was very skeptical. I wanted people to guide me if I was doing the wrong. Thanks to those people I am even stronger in my decision. I appreciate your feedback.
What things did you do as a kid that you now realize is extremely weird? When I was in 4th grade, so around 9 or 10, at a private school, we used pinto beans as counters during math. Well, one day someone realized if you put a bean in water, it would sprout, and it became incredibly fashionable to keep a couple living bean sprouts hidden in your desk at all times. This turned into a whole industry. Sneaking to the cabinet in the back and stealing the beans was risky, so people took on those roles. The beans were old, so getting them to actually sprout was valuable. Others would sneak the sprouts in and out of class to get sun. A boy's grandparents had bought him a science experiment kit that came with hundreds of these little plastic vials that stood up on their own. They were the perfect size for keeping a sprouted pinto bean, so he started trading them. Another two kids had water bottles with a straw that fit neatly into the vials and made it easy to water the sprouts. They turned it into a service. One pretty talented group of girls started making houses out of paper and cardboard for the sprouts to live in. This allowed bean families to become a thing. Another girl realized that the houses meant there was a market for bean sprout furniture. Kids starting pulling textbooks out of their desks and stashing them around the classroom to make space for larger and larger houses. The houses were a turning point, because they ran anywhere from $5 to $10, which was the first time anyone had charged real money for something instead of bartering. In addition, demand for sprouts went through the roof, since you could fit 4 or 5 in a house. The kid who had been successfully sprouting the beans is under immense pressure to produce, and we've crossed a threshold so people are willing to pay real money now. Into this high-pressure situation walks my classmate Julia. Julia brings a tiny bottle of purple liquid one day and tells Bean Sprouter Kid that it's the diluted slime of an extremely rare snail from the forests up north that she collected herself while camping with her family. It's such a strong fertilizer, even diluted, that one drop in each vial will guarantee that a bean will sprout. In addition, a drop to each already sprouted bean will ensure a nice, green plant. There's enough for around 50 sprouts in there, but it's going to cost him $20 for the whole bottle. Well, if you're selling the sprouts at $1 each, $20 is a steal. So the kid comes back the next day with the cash. Julia gives him the fertilizer, and he puts a drop in each vial just before we leave to go home. The next day, all his bean sprouts are dead, and he's pissed. Turns out the fertilizer was just Julia's mom's perfume, and it killed all the plants. Well, Bean Sprouter Kid is not the kind of person to take this laying down, so he goes to the teacher to tell her that he got conned. And the whole thing unravels. The teacher is upset that her students have been devoting hours of in-class time to beans. Parents are upset that money they thought was for snacks or field trips was for beans. The principal has to announce to the whole school that growing plants in your desk is now banned, which just confuses everyone else. And my class is angry at poor bean sprouting kid for snitching and ruining everything. All their hard work is now in the trash. The bean sprout industry never recovered.
My man drinks his own liquid, kids. Straight from the latex. I've been in a relationship with this guy for like a year. When we started dating, after a month of getting to know each other, we went to his place and did the deed. Enjoyable experience overall. But, after he was done, he removed the latex and, with very expert gestures, proceeded to drink his junk right out of it. I was shocked and confused. In my head I was like, you man, what the hell? He was my first partner and I wondered if that was kinda normal? Common? I don't know. Since I used to be a people pleaser, I managed to hide my shock and disgust, and simply asked him, why did you do that? He answered me, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world, it's a lot of kilojoules of energy, I can't waste them. I was even more confused. I was literally speechless, and what was being a very nice and romantical night managed to become a weird and kinda awkward situation. To make things worse, he even stated in a very dramatic tone, I will never allow anyone to eat my semen. He said that like his junk was something precious, like, if someone would ever get access to that, it was like, being able to steal his soul? I don't know. It made no sense. And also, dude, nobody here is trying to steal precious kids, ugh. He wasn't drinking his kids in a kinky or erotic way. He did it like it was an extremely serious and important deal. Why drinking your own liquid, kids, must be so dramatic? We kept dating for several months, and every time we had intimacy, every single time, he did the same thing. I started to become very concerned, since usually inside the latexes there's usually some liquid, I guess? He even complained about the bad taste of the liquid or the latex was made of. The taste of his own kids somehow didn't bother him at all. Good for him. And even if usually liquid is not that toxic, I think that consuming a small amount but very often may not be the healthiest habit. Also, his breath right after this ritual almost made me throw up all the times, since he even refused to brush his teeth afterwards. I didn't chew, I swallowed it in one gulp, so I don't need to brush my teeth. Ew. I tried to discreetly make him understand that his habit was grossing me out, by saying out loud ew or by covering my eyes, but he didn't got the clues. A year passed by. I had enough. I tried to confront him, but nope. He was unmovable. Neither the fact that his passion for his own seed was making me a little uncomfortable, nor the fact that eating lube could be harmful made him stop. He then proceeded to get mad. He stated that he wasn't doing anything wrong, that he just didn't want to waste precious substances from his body and that I was making a scene for nothing. I told him about his breath and he straight up accused me of having a bad smell. I told him that by deflecting my accuse he was just making things worse, but then he interrupted me and just told me I was insufferable. Then he just left. He was extremely angry. I've never seen that side of him. I'm sure that he will tell me to pack my things and to leave.
Do you genuinely believe you have ever been abducted by aliens? This happened to me when I was 10 years old in Calgary, Alberta, in 1970. I was walking home from school, cutting across the school sports field. Our house wasn't far. We lived across the street from the school. There weren't any other kids around, since I had stayed late for a volleyball practice, and the rest of the students had gone home 45 minutes earlier when school let out for the day. It was about 4:30 in the afternoon. Something caught my attention from the corner of my eye, and I stopped and turned to the right to look at it. Floating directly above a house facing the schoolyard was a large UFO. I was in the middle of the football field, so this is about 60 to 70 yards distant from where I stood. The UFO is big, and almost touches the roof of the house. Its width completely overshadows the house. And then some. The lots there are 50 feet wide, which puts the UFO at about 150 feet across and perhaps 25 to 30 feet tall. It is very bright, giving off a harsh white light which hurts my eyes. I look away back towards my house and see a car and a motorcycle on the side street. That street is about half a block away, and I remember being surprised and confused that the drivers are not reacting to the UFO, which clearly must be visible to them, and so obvious, since it is so bright, but the traffic continues as normal. At that point, I become aware that something is forcing me to turn my head back toward the UFO. I'm turning, and my field of view is changing, but I'm not the one doing it. I struggle to turn away, but then it hits me. I am not in control of my body. I panicked, then the next thing that I can remember, I'm walking into my house. It is about 9:30 at night, and dark outside. I go inside, my parents are furious. Apparently they had been trying to find me. I couldn't recall anything from the last 5 hours. The next day, I still can't seem to explain what happened, and my mother is even more angry with me since my new school shoes are ruined, since the tops of them are all scuffed and dirty, like I was dragged face down across the ground with my feet still dragging on the ground. I told my older brothers what happened, and they suggested I keep quiet about it, since nobody would believe me. Good advice, as it turns out, since in the many years since, most of the people I have shared the story with don't really know what to say afterward. Many years later, I still struggle with coming to terms with what happened that night. Sometimes I wonder if it will ever happen again. Sometimes, I wish it would.
What only exists because of people's stupidity. The labels on Superman costumes that say, wearing this does not enable you to fly. The warning on strollers, do not collapse while infant is seated. Do not place child in shopping bag. The tag on the iron that says, do not iron clothes while wearing them. In the user manual for RVs it specifies that the driver must remain in the driver's seat at all times when the RV is in motion because someone thought that cruise control was autopilot and went to take a shower while on the freeway and crashed. If I remember right, part of their argument against the company was that the manual did not say he had to remain in the driver's seat when cruise control was being used.
What is the worst scariest thing that has woken you up? I woke up at 6 a.m. with a 90% collapsed right lung. I was in shock and lived alone but had no idea what was wrong with me. I just couldn't breathe right or catch my breath. Called a spontaneous neurothermax, and I guess it's common on tall lanky white guys that have big growth spurts. I was 27 when it happened. Had to call 911 and get a medic ride to the hospital. The paramedics thought I just had some anxiety, so did I lol, and they mocked it on my ride to the hospital. But the doctor cleared that up quite fast and let me know I was in shock and my blood oxygen levels didn't look good. It was a life-changing event. I couldn't fall asleep without fears of waking up unable to breathe for about 2 years, and I still got the scar where they put the tube through my ribs and into my lung to reinflate it. Let me tell you, it was not fun lol. To expand on this, the first doc didn't put the lung tube in correctly. He was really shoving the thing into my ribs and I could hear the muscle and such tearing. I was quite fit at the time and had a ton of muscle. They also couldn't use the normal smaller tube because they were out, so I got this thick tube. Yay me. A day later I had a new lung tube put in. Because of that I was in a hospital for 3 days. My mom flew from Hawaii overnight to be there for me and I still couldn't thank her enough. Edit. I don't have a 100% reason, but I think this was caused because the day before I was weightlifting max weight on the curling machine. I held my breath on one of those reps and felt odd sensation in my lung. Remember, people always breath out when pulling weight. What things did you do as a kid that you now realize is extremely weird? I used to eat tissues as a kid. My mom found out one day and yelled at me to stop, as any sane parent would do, so I started eating them in secret, sneaking away with a tissue box to another room to eat a tissue or two, until one day when I was about 5 years old I had to go to the hospital. I had no idea what was going on. All I knew was that I had trouble breathing through my nose. Before my operation I was in the hospital and I overheard one of the nurses say that they just needed to remove the excess tissue in my nose. Naturally I thought that the tissues I had eaten had started getting clogged up in my nose and I never ate a tissue again. I made the realization at 14 that it was muscle tissue in my nose and not the actual tissues I was eating. When I was around 5, I would basically act like a train and follow the lines on the playground whilst also using my hands as those little rail things on the wheels, coupling rods. I would also look directly up when it was cold and use my mouth as a chimney. Honestly, it must have looked like I was insane.
Am I the a-hole for being completely honest to my biological parents about how my childhood was really awful? I was given up for adoption right after I was born. Unfortunately, my adoption didn't work out, and I grew up in foster care until I turned 18. I'm now 19 and in college. In February, I got a Facebook message from a man claiming to be my father. We messaged back and forth, and while I kept a lot of my childhood details private, we did make plans to meet him and my mother. They weren't married to each other, by the way. When I got to the restaurant, I was very shocked and honestly upset to find my father and mother had brought their spouses, as well as their children, to surprise me. My father's mother, so my grandmother, was also there. I was already feeling very emotional about the whole thing, and seeing everyone there didn't help. So I sat through an hour of listening to them sharing all about their lives while I fake smiled through everything. Honestly, I felt very jealous that they had kids they really loved and how they all had really happy lives after ditching me. Then they started asking about me and my parents, and how my Facebook gave very little away about my life. I basically lost it and started crying like a little beach, and told them how shitty my adoptive parents were and how shitty foster life was. I was pretty snarky and sarcastic when I said that I'm glad their lives worked out for them because mine sure as hell didn't. I couldn't stop crying, and my father had to drop me back home. He was very apologetic. I feel very shitty about it. I made my mother and father cry at the restaurant. They were really nice people. I got a few messages from my mother and father separately where they were apologizing and asked if they could make it up to me. My mother in particular seems really upset by everything, and I hate that I may have messed up her happy life. Her last message basically said that she's been unable to sleep and wants to see me again. I've been ignoring their messages and just been focusing on school instead. Am I the a-hole? Maybe I should have been more honest before the meetup. Workers of Disneyland, what's the most heartwarming experience you've had with park guests? I worked at Disneyland, and my job was to make sure the guests had the best experience possible. I may not have been an actor or had a glamorous position, but I took pride in being a cast member. On July 4th, while working in Fantasyland, 2 girls around 10 years old came up to me with their mom. They were wearing princess dresses, but their faces were filled with sadness and fear. The mother told me how their dad always made them wait in line while he went on rides with other women and didn't let them enjoy Disneyland. My heart broke for these girls, so I asked my manager if there was anything we could do for them that day. Since it wasn't too busy, he agreed and we got them fast passes for Peter Pan's ride. When they saw this they lit up but were still nervous, so I stayed with them during the ride to make sure they were okay. After that we took them on It's a Small World twice since it seemed like it would be therapeutic for them after what happened to them before coming here. We then walked around Fantasyland letting the girls explore all of the stores and attractions before taking them to Ariel's grotto, which was closed off just for VIPs at the time. Although Ariel wasn't there, Princess Tiana was there instead, which made both of the girls really happy. After that they started getting hungry, so we took them out to lunch where Minnie Mouse herself greeted us all and invited us into her private dining room where she served us an amazing meal. You could tell how happy their mom was seeing her daughters happy again. Minnie gave each of us plastic keys which acted as VIP passes, giving us access to secret rooms, behind the scenes areas and special character meet and greets throughout Disneyland. Later on we used these keys when meeting Tinkerbell, who welcomed us into Pixie Hollow where she served tea and cookies, something both of those little girls loved. That day will forever be one of my most memorable experiences working at Disney, because seeing those 2 little girls go from being treated poorly by their dad into feeling loved again just warmed my heart beyond belief. It reminded me how much better life can be when surrounded by people who genuinely care about your well-being.
People who lost a lot of weight. How did you do it? Blow. Lots and lots of blow. I was relatively clean until graduating college, when I met my boyfriend Adam. Adam loved to party and take hardcore stuff. I also had a little bit of chub at the time of meeting him, and Adam would sometimes tell me to lose weight. Slowly, Adam became verbally abusive, while simultaneously getting me hooked on blow and the other stuff he was taking. He made me pay for most of it, by the way, and within 8 months of dating him, I had been completely hooked. I would get my paycheck, and that same night spend perhaps 2/3 of it on blow. I shared it all with Adam as we sat back, had intimacy and did other addict stuff. Due to spending so much money on it, I was no longer able to afford groceries consistently. My diet became bread with butter, pasta, and blow. Adam, however, never spent his money on blow, and just leached off me. I was too hooked on it, and he had manipulated me too much at this point for me to see it was wrong. Within the first year with Adam I had lost near 50 pounds. Going from 153 pounds down to 105. I was rail thin and not able to afford meals. Not that I cared, I had no appetite for food anyway. Then one day I became ravenously hungry. I was supposed to spend $50 on blow that night, but spent it all on a huge feast for myself and Adam when he came home from wherever he was at. When he came home, I told him I got us food, and he flipped out. He started yelling, saying that money was meant for blow, not some janky pizza. He then laid hands on me for the first time ever. That's when I saw the real him. The monster who stripped me of my identity. Who gave me eating disorders, and the man who set me on a path of addiction. He laid hands on me for what felt like hours, and he left the house after. I lay there covered in bruises, wailing. Just my luck, a few minutes after Adam left, the pizza guy shows up. Still in tears, and with fresh wounds, I opened the door and took my food. I ate it, and Adam was still not home. Considering we were living together, it was hard to leave. But that same day I left. Thankfully, he was gone for the rest of the day. I left him no note or explanation, I was just gone. I went to the house of a friend he didn't know, and told her everything. She urged me to file a police report. Nothing came of it, and Adam is still walking free, but I was able to escape him.
My evolving journey of desire and attraction. When I think of what I like, I immediately think of female librarians with full, soft lips. She's beautiful, with cascading honey brown hair and bottle green eyes. I feel dizzy just thinking about her, about how she smells, sugar cookies, flowers and the cloying perfume of married women in the hallway of a casino, passion and the sweet, bittersweet tang of whiskey. My mouth goes dry and the hairs stand up on the back of my neck. My skin prickles. After I speak to a woman's femininity, I feel desire. I even want to kiss her on the forehead, in front of her children. Every year, I always try to find a way to describe this feeling, like how an onslaught of joy can almost stop your heart, or how it makes me want to build a pillow fort and eat a pack of Malamars. Passion is that feeling, but with the taste of Malamars and the squeaking of children's shoes on the wood floors of a library. For many years, I could only find women who gave me that feeling. I found it so difficult to describe and so exhilarating, really, that I took time to visit as many local libraries as possible. Public, university, Catholic, however. I didn't care. I just wanted to kiss more women and build more pillow forts. There was a highlight to my life when I found a library in Pennsylvania with a wood floor. I scoped out that library for 5 years. They just repainted, and the sweet smell of tea candles and a woman's growing annoyance with men parked in the stacks finally reached my nose. I spent 2 weeks working my way up to flirtation, then mild cruelty. Do you ever leave the stacks? I've been coming here for 2 years now, ding dong, and I've never seen you in the cafe or the lobby. That kind of thing. Finally, she was fed up. Man, you're cute. I'll let you skip past my snark and your pathetic flirting because it's getting late and I'm tired. Leave your number and I'll call you tomorrow. The next day, she stole the keys to her supervisor's office and we had an hour before janitors started cleaning up. It reminded me of that flooded casino in Atlantic City. But instead of whiskey, there was red hots. There was perfume and the smell of old paper. But the taste was stale, like a man who spent decades cleaning his teeth with toothpaste that's half a year expired. The thrill was gone. The next 3 women I talked to found me dull, uninteresting. It wasn't the same, and I stopped. Then I met Danny. Danny is a small, thin man. He wears women's clothes and he likes me at first because he thinks I'm dangerous. I'm not, really. We're attracted by different things, and that's okay. I'm attracted to danger, hawking packs of cigarettes in front of a public bathroom, blending in with the gangly, awkward boys that smoke and coast into a casino dressed like a machine gun wielding mobster, and the smell of cheap cologne and perspiration. Danny likes pretty women. There was this smell that changed everything. It was musky and sexy, like women and men in a casino after it's closed and you're breaking in to see if there's anything worth stealing. It's the smell of a long-dead fruit that's been squished in a cheap purse for 6 months. He screamed. There was a line of desperate women who were tapping their toes and whispering under their breath, prick, prick, prick. We both looked at each other and back at our intended targets like a long, embarrassing game of tag. I guess that means we should help each other? He said, and we awkwardly shook hands. So now we're working on mutually tolerating the other. And when one of us is around and being annoying, like when I have a dream about honey green librarians and Danny wears frilly orphan Annie panties, we help each other. I'm working on developing a taste for pretty young gay men. The taste of Malamars and whiskey is fading. I actually think it's more of a feeling now, that weight behind my heart, like you need to sit with it a while before you can talk about it. The feeling, now, is that I want to help this man live his life, even if it means, somehow, he ends up in a Catholic school library chewing gum and wearing a nun's habit.
What was the greatest pleasure you ever felt? When they gave me morphine and several bags of fluid to flush out a kidney stone. The instant relief combined with the morphine euphoria. Sweet baby Jesus. Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm a recovering heroin addict, and heroin is still the best feeling I've ever felt. You could have told me that my family died in a car accident 30 seconds after I injected my hit and I wouldn't have reacted or cared. That's why heroin is so fucking dangerous. It makes you not care about anything but getting your next hit. I absolutely will not miss the stress of getting my next fix though. I got to a point, eventually, where I feel better as just a regular, sober person who's not interested in getting his next fix. Than a person who has to stress the fuck out about getting their dealer to respond and going through extremely painful withdrawals. I had a dream that I was a toaster. I woke with a feeling of anticipation. Then I made toast with pure concentration. Afterwards I was entirely fulfilled, having accomplished the ultimate purpose of my existence.
People who've dated a psycho, what incident made you aware that you were dating a psycho? He wanted me to text him my work schedule and then would call me on the work phone and wait in the parking lot for me to come out of work. Wanted to know how much was in each paycheck. One time I texted him my work schedule and he misread it and freaked out non-stop for 6 hours searching for me. He called my whole family and was about to alert the police. I broke up with him in public because he would not believe it when I broke up with him in private. It was finally to the point where random people who were nearby were like, "You just got dumped." I was seeing this guy for a month or so and was very intrigued by him. He seemed like the perfect partner for me, one straight out of a movie. On our third date, however, he mentioned that he recently called off his engagement. I was taken aback but still interested. I told my friend, and she used publicdatacheck.com to look him up. Turns out he and his family have 27 counts of fraud between them all. Bullet dodged.
I caught my bisexual girlfriend cheating on me with 2 other girls, but I don't want to break up with her. My girlfriend and I have lived together after dating for 3 years. She has never given me any reason not to trust her, and I didn't even know she was bisexual until the moment I caught her cheating on me. For context, my girlfriend grew up in the South and comes from an extremely religious evangelical household. I also grew up in a strict, religiously bigoted household, and it was something we bonded over when we first met. We both rejected all types of religious practice when we grew up and moved away, but I think my girlfriend was more traumatized by her religious environment than I could have ever known. She would tell me how her parents would often preach about all of the sinners of the world and make her swear on the Bible as a child that she would not grow up to live in sin like the rest of the world. My girlfriend was also physically abused by her parents, so like I said, her upbringing was very traumatizing and I really empathize with her as she has trouble adjusting to adult life after such a problematic childhood. My girlfriend is a really quiet, soft-spoken person, so I never thought I would find out she was doing something like this. Last week, I had a 3-day-long work trip that I had to travel far to. When I kissed my girlfriend goodbye, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I ended up not having to stay the last day, and I was excited to come home early and spend the day with my girlfriend. I picked up flowers on the way home and made us dinner reservations since I was happy I would be able to surprise her. But when I unlocked the door to our apartment, I immediately noticed something was off. First of all, there were 2 extra pairs of female shoes sitting by the doorway after I entered. This was already weird to me. That's when I heard soft moans coming from our bedroom. When I walked it, I found my girlfriend on the bed making love to 2 other girls I had never seen. I dropped the flowers and said, "What the F?" They all started scrambling to put their clothes on, and the 2 other girls left in a hurry. I started crying out of shock, and I asked my girlfriend, who was also crying, what the hell was going on. That's when she completely broke down and told me that she had known she was bisexual since she was a kid. But she has felt so ashamed of her sexuality growing up, that she never felt safe or confident enough to come out. She said she had started hooking up with girls behind my back about a year ago, and that she was so sorry. She said she was so sorry for hurting me, but she just didn't know how to be truthful about her orientation to me, since all she had ever felt about it was shame. She started to pack her things while just crying and apologizing over and over. I don't know what came over me. I felt so bad for her at that moment and I knew every detail of how awfully her family had raised her. I took the bag she was packing out of her hands and just sat on the couch with her and held her as she cried. I was hurt, of course. At the end of the day, I had literally caught her cheating on me, but more than anything, I felt pain for her. It was crazy to me that after 3 years of dating she still felt the need to hide this part of herself from me, and I knew if she had grown up in a more accepting family, this probably never would have happened. We talked for a long time, and ultimately I told her I forgave her even though she had hurt me. I told her I wanted to work through this together, and that I didn't want her to feel any more shame against her own sexuality. I asked her if she could just be honest with me from now on, then we could work on our relationship and find a situation that works well for us both. I love her and I see her more as a traumatized child than someone who set out to hurt me, and I won't abandon her. I screw up by pretending to be deaf for the entire quarantine. When quarantine started, I began an online course for a few subjects. These aren't my school classes, and I've never met these people before. There are about 10 other kids in the class, and the teacher is great. The first 2 days went well, but on the 3rd day, I messed up. We were in the middle of a physics class, and I got completely distracted. I have a low attention span, and it was too much for me. When the teacher called my name, I had no idea what he was talking about, so I tried to Google it. My internet was shitty, so it took forever to load. The teacher got pissed and wondered why I wasn't responding. Panicking, I texted him on the Google Meet chat, intending to make an excuse about my laptop's audio and microphone not working. But in my panic, I vaguely said, "I can't actually hear. I've been reading the subtitles, they take time to load." The teacher apologized, thinking I was deaf, since I was wearing hearing aids, and I went along with it. I am actually hard of hearing and wear hearing aids, so that I can function normally every day with no problem of hearing. I lied and told classmates that even with the aid, I couldn't hear much. They bought it and started liking me more, especially Carla, who said I had a beautiful smile. But my charade backfired when the instructor decided to meet in person. I pretended to be deaf and dumb, watching videos to figure out how to behave. We met, and no one uncovered my secret. I spent time with Carla, who was stunning. She was smart, funny, and kind. We communicated through notes on tissue papers. She handed me one, asking if I'd date her. Panicking, I asked for time to think. I agreed. I can't let her go, but I can't pretend to be fully deaf either. I could tell her the truth, risking embarrassment or her thinking I was an asshole. I just got back from the date with Carla. I prepared appropriate flowers for apologizing and got white orchids. She had a notepad and pencils, which melted me. Anxious, I eventually wrote, "I'm not actually deaf. Or dumb." She replied, "I know you're not deaf, but you are pretty dumb." It turns out she Googled me before and found my Instagram with videos of me at concerts. She played along to see how long I'd keep it going. I apologized and felt bummed she only wanted to date me to see how long I'd keep up. But she didn't end the date. We had a great time. We're not officially dating, but we set a second date. Our second date will be volunteering at a center for deaf kids. You're way too fat to come to my party. We have done plenty of things that are not physically taxing with her, but even the small stuff, she ends up on a bench half the day. We went to a small mall, half the day on the bench. It was window shopping. She is obese, her ankles are swollen from her weight. The connection between her weight and not walking far without a break is very obvious. I will try to keep this short. I have 3 girls and we still like to do girl trips for the day. My son got married to a girl named Beth. Now before her first kid she was average weight and after it got a lot worse. Her only kid is 8 years old at this point and she hasn't lost the weight. It's bad enough that she needs constant breaks walking. I used to like her and now I don't due to how she acts. Everywhere we go with her it is constant complaining that she is tired. The last girl's trip to the mall was spent sitting on a bench half the day since she needed constant break. If you try to leave she will go on about abandoning her. It's annoying. I invited the girls to go to a farm for pumpkin patch and pick some apples. It is big orchards and a ton of walking. We went, it was a great time and some pictures went on Facebook. I got a call from Beth asking why she wasn't invited. I lied saying it was just a family trip and she accused me of lying. I had enough and told her the truth. I told her she wasn't invited due her weight. That she forces us to stop all the time and it ruins the trips most days since we don't get to do half the stuff. She called me a jerk and hung up. I am getting texts from my SOM saying to apologize but the girls are on my side and are sick of having trips ruined since we have to wait for her all the time. Am I the a-hole for telling my niece to stay in the closet so she can become a millionaire? My 42M niece, 17F, recently confided in me that she is a lesbian. I supported her, let her know I'd be there, etc. usual ally stuff. However, she told me she was going to come out to the whole world this week. I let her know she should absolutely wait for her grandparents, my parents, to pass. My father is incredibly wealthy and has tens of millions of dollars in assets that he will be passing down once he is gone. My father is a raging homophobe who has flat out stated any gay individual in our family would be written out of the will. And to make sure the rest of us don't just split more money with said gay relative, they will, instead, have that portion of the inheritance put aside for that family member, donated to charitable causes. That money will be erased from the inheritance. Since both my father and mother are in incredibly poor health, stage 4 cancer and debilitating dementia respectively, I told my niece she should stay in the closet for a while longer. If she comes out as a lesbian and they find out, she will quite literally lose out on $7 million. She was a little sad but was also appreciative since that is obviously a life-changing amount of money that will allow her to live luxuriously until she dies. My wife, however, said that I am being an asshole. I am telling this poor girl to hide who she is just to appease old bigots. That is true. I am asking her to appease old bigots, but I feel like her life quality will be much better with $7 million at the cost of 1 to 2 years in the closet at the top. I have also seen my father's will and know who is getting what, so my niece is definitely going to receive $7 million as long as my father doesn't rewrite or edit his will. Am I the asshole for telling my niece to stay in the closet so she can be a millionaire? Today I effed up by poisoning myself and almost drowning. Last summer I wanted to do some endurance swimming. I took myself out to Black Sandy Beach and challenged myself to swim across the lake. The distance was about half of a mile. I had done this a few times. I felt confident. On my way out I drank 5-hour energy drink, did some breathing exercises, and got in the water. It was a nice summer day and the lake had grown thick with green algae. The greens lined the shore fairly thick but once I swam out a few yards I didn't have to contend with the bramble anymore. I was able to make my way steadily to the opposite shore. I decided I had plenty of time to explore. I started swimming south along the far bank, periodically turning onto my back to rest and enjoy the sunshine. Just under half a mile along I found a break in the shore and wondered if a river or stream flowed into the lake from there. The water there was stagnant so there was no inlet but I saw 2 deer coming up to the shoreline. I wanted to see how close I could get and I had my eyes trained on them. I was cutting across the cove toward the deer when I started to smell the scent of bitter almond. Odd. I tore my gaze from the deer and looked down at the water. The hue of the algae was no longer a mossy green but rather a teal blue. I was right in the middle of it. I started to get a bad feeling. My gut told me to go back to my truck. The swim back was longer. I had traveled a ways south. I pushed myself harder, intent on getting back. Some kayakers checked on me but I insisted I was fine. A little over halfway back a wave of exhaustion hit. That concerned me a bit, but I was determined to reach the shore. I eventually neared the shore. My legs caught in the undergrowth. I struggled to stay upright. My right calf started to cramp hard. I fought, kicking past the brambles with just one leg. I felt for the lake bed. I needed to touch bottom, to let my leg rest. No such luck. I pressed on. My other leg cramped. I was weirdly unconcerned. A moment later my foot touched bottom. I felt a surge of relief. It hurt to swim. It hurt to stand too but I wouldn't drown doing it. Tiny alarm bells rang in my mind. Something was wrong. I felt great, ecstatic, on top of the world. It didn't make sense to feel that way. I was in pain. I'd almost died. Why did I feel so good? I painfully made my way to the water's edge. I crawled onto the shore. I heard voices on the other side of the brush. They asked if I was okay. I tuned them out. I stretched my calves. I heard the voices say, "Yeah, she's fine." The ground beneath me shifted. I looked up at a tree. It was shifting too. It reminded me of a mushroom trip. I had not taken any substances except caffeine. I should have been worried. I wasn't. I felt great. The cramping subsided. I made my way up to my truck. The world spun. I climbed in my truck bed to wait it out. I was reminded that I should be concerned. I should go to the hospital. I decided to go home instead. I still felt pretty good. I started to sweat on the highway. My window was down. My clothes were soaked. Why am I sweating? I made it home. I got in the shower. I kept turning the heat up. I was sweating. I was so cold. I stepped out of the shower and looked into the mirror. My lips and my tongue were blue. What the hell? I pulled up Google. I checked symptoms but came up blank. I remembered the blue algae. I looked it up. I found a warning. The algae was poisonous. Cyanide. I had cyanide-induced hypoxia. Oh, shit. I got back in my truck. I went to Panda Express. What? I was hungry. I looked up the antidote to cyanide poisoning. I still felt pretty good. I was aware on some level I should be at the hospital. My urge to satiate my hunger was stronger. The antidote to cyanide poisoning was cyanocobalamin, aka vitamin B12. 5-hour energy has B12. The article also mentioned oxygen therapy. Well, I had that down. I breathed quite heavily during my swim. I picked up another 5-hour, downed it, went to bed, and passed out. When I woke up, I told my husband about my experience. He got upset. He asked me why I didn't tell him to take me to the hospital. I wondered the same thing. I looked up symptoms of hypoxia again. One of the side effects of hypoxia is that you can be fully aware that you are dying but you just don't care. I'm lucky to still be alive.